𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝗺𝗏. Number 1. Guys, tigokurukura namo vadriver mirai tigokurukura namo vadriver mirai tigokurukura namo vadriver mirai tigokurukura namo namo mukoma 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝗺𝗏 zviri sei atete Julie makadi my boys zviri kufamba here chamisa maiona here yakaitaurwa napresident Nero hanzi musatarisa mumhu ndiri mushina muhombe handiti maona Shapiro zviri sei mudaro tapinda mukoma mapinda zvenyu tikurukure naye hanzi napresident Nelson Chamisa amutarise mumhu wemunhu bwanja bambo bwinweno ene kudi yako izvakutoda izvinenge zvakutoda tutupiki because zvakaoma vashoma vaunoona vanonong'ona zvandiri kuita izvi baba vamutsa makadi atete 𝗥𝗂𝗿𝗶𝗺𝗏 zviri sei makaiona here mbizi mbizi pakaipa mwana wamai vashoma vanhu vanonong'ona mazino makore atirana kunana UK wakakona uchinong'ona mazino vanofanira kuseka kuti uri kudya nyama inokuuraya. Kunana Zimbabwe vanenge vachibayiwa nekudya mubora kuno kuti kutoshuwira mubora kudai Mwari vagona kuti dai mubora wangu wabata ndadya mubora. Saka zvinoenderana nenzvimbo atete Cecilia makadi mukoma Nero muri sei handazwa mudhara Nelson Chamisa vachitaura akanzi musatarisa mhumhi Dhewa vakaimba vakati mushini muhombe. Saka zvairehwa unzi mushini muhombe hausi mumhu. Musatarisa vanhu vane mabig board mukati ava ndo mishini muhombe kwete. Andoda bhareta 1 iri bomu komalewad mabhareta amapedzi mabhareta mamwaya amapedzi mabhareta arimo munomu handizwa kuti rimwe racho reinfanira kuti raenda kupa. What I want to do is, first of all, I want to introduce myself to you. It seems like people do not know about 𝗥𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃 most of the time. I've been tagged on another YouTube video which was made by former ZBC journalists who made it clear. Thank you to that journalist. He made it clear to Zimbabweans that 𝗥𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃 is not a soldier. I am not a soldier. Right. And I never joined Zimbabwe army. Never. I never joined the Zimbabwe army. I am not a soldier. I was never a soldier. Right. I think this must be clear to the people of Zimbabwe that I am not a soldier. I was never a soldier. And he shouldn't be army general in the new Zimbabwe. Think he should be. Thank you, Atete Julie. So I saw a video on YouTube. Former ZBC journalist trying to explain. Let me try to get his name. Because in Zvangu, my journalist says ZBC nda vatanyanyoziva vanga vari vana Mzala, vana Eric Knight, vana Richmond Siyakurima, vana Garikai Chaunza. Those are former ZBC heavyweights we used to hear because taivanyanya vaziva vamwe vacho vaenda kuezomugidho vaipresenta maprograms ataifarira vamwe vaenda kuezomugidho vana Eric Knight the general anorasika munhu anorasikawo but hazvireva kuti Eric Knight kana arasika toita hit hard on him kuti Eric Knight wakataura kati ikonomi yeZimbabwe ino kundokupai 2 years inenge yakufunctiona mwana weZimbabwe anodawo zvakanaka muupenyu hwake anopawo his predictions but when his predictions fail to come true we should not hammer him kuti why iwewe anditi maona. So the other issue is azana Ruben Baro vakasiyana na Eric unoona. So the other issue is I'm trying to get the name of this this journalist. If I can't get it now, I'll get it later. The gentleman was saying something about 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃. No, I say thank you. Mighty nai ndakasimba mzaya warova kurova unge 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 mbanami unopota uchibatika tinzwa kuti uri sei nai mainoku makadi ndakasimba mwana wamai hanzi vakasiyana vakafanana square vanetebhela zviri sei abi tula bechilude tula. Saka that journalist was explaining in a video that 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 is not a soldier, which is true. 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 has never been a soldier, which is true. I am not a soldier. I've never been a soldier. But I was a prison officer. My history is clear. It's all over the internet. Those querying or interested to know much about 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃, munondibata panhare. Majournalists amunobvunzaya havandizive. Most of them vakatanga kuzondinzwa because of social media. Ndakutaura. Malvin Zvimba. Chana chavatete. Zviri kusei mavi. Hanzi promi amandise zviri kufamba here. I am trying to get the name of the PS Nyon zviri kudini. Ndikutry kuwana zita ra journalist 𝗂𝗏𝗵𝗃𝗃. Is a former journalist 𝗂𝗏𝗵𝗃𝗃. Anonzi Andrew Neshamba. Very good. Ndabva ndaona saradzo. Andrew Neshamba. I think I have to play the video so people. Right. So I want people to see former ZBC journalist Andrew Neshamba. Ndo bla end Neshamba. Dzachitaurawo zvadzachitaura. Hanzi Andrew Neshamba oudzazve 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 kuti haasi musoja. This is journalist yatoiswa panenge kune tererai.
Andrew, thanks for telling 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 kuti haasi musoja ndomwe blaza ishanda kuGM. And this means zamchandro isaneo.
Apa dziri kutaura dzichikaurwa naYuda. Ndi bla Andrew Neshamba ndisekuru ndana sekuru kana Neshamba. Ameno dzaita hanzi dzine munhu ari kudziudza kuti udza 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 kuti anga hausi musoja kana anga asiri musoja. I don't know what the intention of that video. Hanzi kwakamboti uri musoja rini iko tibi. Mabasa ezanu. Hanzi 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 this video iri pa YouTube. Ndatagwaona someone zvikanzi Andrew Neshamba oudza 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃 kuti hausi musoja. So I think it is clear, ladies and gentlemen, from the way they start. Mukaenda pa YouTube kana pa Facebook pangu munoona ndakapfeka uniform yeprison. Ndakapfeka uniform yeprison. I've never joined the army. I don't want to be a soldier. This is why I had to join prison, because I didn't want to be a soldier. I am not a soldier. I was a prison officer. zvekuti kana ndikadzoka kumusha ndikanzi basa raunda kudzoka unoita nogona hangu kudzoka unoita prison officer zvine maadvantages nemadisadvantage azvo haasi foma dziriko kuZBC dzakambokwikwidza MP 2018 zano oraiti dzichiriko kuZBC komana hanzi dzakambokwikwidzwa dzikadavara member of parliament weZANU-PF dzikazvamburwa. Saka kana dzichiriko kuZBC, I think he must know that I was a prison officer. He doesn't need to be told, because history yangu haina kumbobva yavigwa kuti 𝗀𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃 akajoina prison service in 1996 musi wa24 April. Every time I come live on Facebook, I've never hidden that history. I've been open to the people of Zimbabwe. Munondiziva wani kuti handina side randakaviga randinoviga nachanovanza. As I have a video that qualifies the topic of the 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗃𝗃𝗃 forget magwaza moroi makadi haiwawo newewo unopindura anagamba akwe patitu tipe zvedu zvekutsvaga mari pakaoma. Tinenge tichidaka kuti vana ZBC anzokanzi ndakanzi nemwe munhu andisendera message zvikanzi Shapiro mamessages ari kusvika usaneta vape information endru neshamba akabva kuZBC karoyo akafoma meno. I don't know zviri kutaurwa. I don't know him much. Munhu woti ndasikanyanya kumuziva maningi, but it seems dzondiziva anzi murise ngomalavu makadi lavu momeza Shila masiko zviri sei atete Shila makasimba here Nelson Chitorera ndakasimba mwana wamai. It seems dzinenge dzinonyanya kundiziva sterei kuti Shapiro akanga ari a prison officer. Definitely I am not a soldier. There is no day I ever come here to say look I was a soldier. Andina kubva ndambodaro. Hanzi akuita social media TV inonzi dramas oraiti hadziudzei kuti Shapiro haiwa havige akagara angori mujeregadi. Hapana paakamboya mwe musi achiti ndaive musoja inini ndakazoenda kuDRC ndakazoenda kuSomalia ndakazorwa hondo pakati. Hapana. Ndine knowledge. Kona pandakaenda kuDRC handina kuenda kuhondo kuDRC. Ndofunga ndakagara chitaurira vanhu. Zimbabwe soldiers, most of them I used to meet them in Congo. Not because ndaenda kunorwa hondo aiwa. Ndaitotengesawo zvinhu zvangu zvandaitengesa. KuDRC kwaibva majini. You still remember majini mastone watch? Kuna ainzi mastone watch kozi amajini anga akatsvukuruka stereka anga akanaka zvikuru. Taima hodha kuLubumbashi. Tichiuya nawo tichimatengesa kuZimbabwe. Mamwe acho taimatora kuKinshasa. But Kinshasa ruona Kinshasa is a very big city. Yekuti waiti ukasvika dzimwe nguva waivhekiswa mari dzako. Saka I used to go to DRC to trade, buy and sell things. Ndozvandaifambira muCongo, muZambia, Mozambique. Ndozvandaifambira chete. Handabva ndamboenda kuhondo. Ndakati ndasvikako ndaisangana nemasoja ekuZimbabwe tichitaura vachiti hautyi kufamba uri kurira pfuti kudai. Ndikati hakana guys, toita kuti zvinake. Handiti maona kuda kurarama. Kuma 1999 2000 2001 ikoko taiuya nezvinhu zvataitengesa kuZimbabwe, majini, especially majini ndowandaiuya nawo ndichitengesera vanhu vekuZimbabwe. Vafana vemukembe ndaivatengesa. Vamwe vacho vaiona vakapfeka majini akanaka vafunga kuti bhabhasi. Yanga isiri bhabhasi. Ndini ndaiuya nawo majini acho iwayo. Hanzi jinji hanzi mukoma ndikakumhoresa iwai muchiramba makanyarara. 2023 anofanirwa kudzoka. Thank you Jay. No, andisikarambe ndakanyarara ndenda focus on what I need to present. Sorry mwana wamai atete Monica Nyatsanza makadi. Saka ndisina kuignore. But ndenge ndafamba nendima pane chipinda ndoda kumhoresa imbese ku acknowledge that you are here with me today and we are going to discuss something. Mkoma Elvis ndakasimba. Gimu zviri kufamba here. Hanzi better to watch Victor what Shapiro ndakasimba mwana atete babu makadi Victor Hunda izita huru serege rinoti zvarinondirangarira zvandorangarira naro sare kuti Hunda edi. Saka regai nditaure titange program tingaswera timhoresana toita hour timhoresana. Saka let's get into the discussion today. The discussion that I have, Pride Chama, hanzi kudakaroko stage hanzi bongoma yuda 2023 dzoka nesu pazanza tikudzoka kumba sweet home sweet tine mushini mukuru president wechidiki vanonzi president Nelson Chamisa hanzi mukazwa dhewa akaimba dhewa mushina muhombe vakom havasi kureva big board kana big head kune mwana wane musoro mukuru sana komicho anonga kufuka kuti iwo ndo mushina mukuru mushina muhombe unoonekwa nemabasa auonekwe nekukura musoro ande tipirei mukomana mudariro debdeb ndakasimba mwana mai ngatipindei hake ngapinde hake mukomana naye saka tiri kutaura sekuru Henry neshamba sekuru it's very unfortunate. I'm not a soldier. I haven't been a soldier before. I'm still a prison officer. Although, time my operations are tighter. You still remember, nichukutaura kuti pakati zaona chidumo takabatana nema soldier tikatsvaga chidumo. Saka taiti kana kuivhingwenda kuma escorts tichiescota ma prisoners taenda nema soldier. Tiri musame motikari takatakura pfuti dzimwe chete same tactic yatoshandisa. Saka chinhu chinonzi musoldier dzimwe nguva sekuru neshamba havazozivi. Musoldier haisi camouflage. Musoldier training yaunenge wakaita kana ichikubvumira kuti you can engage an enemy, you can fight an enemy to the state. You are a soldier. And what? Good anonzi my foot soldiers. Sekuru neshamba vanogona kutadza kunzwisisa. But he is a journalist. Dzofana kuziva what is a soldier. Nai andikadzidzise mudhara wangu. Hanzikapinda hake mukomana. Vanakomuchira weguru. Kura musoro mahara nai mukomadoni. Makadi Natasha Gadzambo zviri kufamba ri mwana wamai. Saka let's go straight into the topic of today. The topic of today is about rural folks. You have seen quite a number of videos on YouTube. You've seen quite a videos. As my guy, and thanks boss, and Anganda Garisa, and this way per life. Munoti wakurowa. Ndikuya kuzokunokera manje. Yeso zvikwasara kuya door to door. Andre. Ndozvasara manje. Msharukwa. Zviri kudini. Ansoro bhangu komichi. Sexy. Nezinganga. Hansi komichi ndi bhangu. And then guys, so the topic of today is makaona here President Nelson Chamisa vachivharirwa road vachitemerwa motikari vachinzi hatitoda kuti mupinde kuenda kumaruva. Zvakandidzidzisa a lot of things that I need to talk about today. That the rural folk, the people who reside in rural areas. Hey, why is that boy screaming?
I need him to go upstairs so I can clean. They're disturbing me. I need to clean the kitchen.
Yeah. Can you go to his bed, please?
Go upstairs.
Tell him, hey, good night. Clint,
Yes, sir.
Can this iPad switch on so that he can go and use it in bed? I'm not sure.
I don't know if there's a charger for it.
Okay, bring it back. Yeah. No, it's switching on. Is it turning on?
Yeah.
Hey, Trish iPad.
Yeah, bye-bye, Ashi. Take it upstairs, please. I didn't want disturbance today because this has to floor.
Yeah, I know.
And didn't want
Let's go.
rural folk are waking up now. Yes, this is the topic at Julie. That the rural folk are waking up now. They are beginning to see. So ZANU-PF knows that MDC has reached the navy. You know the jugular navy. MDC has reached the jugular navy of ZANU-PF. So we have reached that jugular vein. You know the jugular vein. We have reached that. And that jugular vein is the final straw to the death of ZANU-PF. So what does it mean? Let me start doing the introduction. Most of the part this is a well-researched presentation. So following the end of the Cold War, I want guys to understand. Tag those rural people. Please make sure that they listen to this presentation. That following the end of the Cold War, the United Nations and the European Union, as well as member states, in their own capacity, each shifted from comprehension to targeted sanctions. So let me talk about targeted sanctions to assist our rural folk or those people who reside in the rural areas. They must listen to this presentation. That before Cold War, United Nations and the European Union, they were using what we call comprehensive sanctions, but they changed into targeted sanctions. The two sanctions are different, and it does not need a rocket scientist to come and explain to you how different these two sanctions are. The easiest explanation that I can give to you to show you that these two sanctions are different. Comprehensive sanctions are slapped against a nation. That means kamwana akazvarwa nhasi kanozvarwa kari pama-sanctions. Mdara akazvarwa 8 years ago anongoswera pama-sanctions. This was a weapon that was being used by United Nations, by European Union, to slap rogue countries like Zimbabwe with the sanctions. So these were known as comprehensive sanctions, which were slapped against a nation. I will explain much to that as we go along. But after Cold War, United Nations and the European Union, they changed the policy. They stopped the comprehensive sanction, and they started issuing the targeted sanctions. And these targeted sanctions are targeted on various things, including individuals, entities, regions of a country. So they are targeted. A good example of a targeted sanction on a region, it was the regions which were controlled by UNITA in Angola. Those regions were slapped with the targeted sanctions. I will explain a lot as I am going through this presentation. If you look at Southern Rhodesia, the one which declared UDI, it was slapped with the comprehensive sanctions from 1965 to 1979. As kurura yeko Africa akuna Facebook mkoma ito rai isu hedu yes Agi, so that even if you phone, you can explain to them that mkoma shepherd Yuda vakataura vachiti ma comprehensive sanctions, they were mostly used before the end of Cold War. After the end of Cold War, United Nations and the European Union, they adopted a different policy to try and coerce those repressive regimes to reform. And they used what they call targeted sanctions. So I was giving a very good example of comprehensive sanctions which were slapped on Southern Rhodesia from 1965 to 1979. These were called economic sanctions. Then South Africa was also slapped with the same sanctions from 1977 to 1994. And South Africa was slapped with the mandatory arms embargo. That means South Africa from 1977 to 1994, they were not allowed to buy weapons. They were not allowed to sell weapons to any country. And this was a sanction that South Africa was slapped with. So if you look at targeted sanctions, it involves measures such as my financial sanctions. I want people to understand this, as you should do audio presentation that can be shared on WhatsApp for rural works. Yes, what we will do is we will download this in audio. Then we cut it so that they can understand what we are saying here. Yes. So, could I announce my financial sanctions? Could I announce my travel bans? Could I announce my arms embargoes? These are types of sanctions that a country can be imposed or slapped upon. They can look at trade sanctions. Which sanctions were slapped on Southern Rhodesia? They can look at flight bans. kune anonzi ma-admission restrictions, koze anonzi ma-diplomatic sanctions, koye anonzi ma-boycotts. All these are types of sanctions. As well as specific measures applied on rough diamonds and timber and so on. There are different types of sanctions. There are loads of sanctions. As I'm sending you a video inbox. If possible, play it here. You might have seen it, but check it out. I'll open it here. Anzi mune presentation and this, but briefly chimbotuza ekuti ye bullet car yava papi ya president. Yesterday I was waiting for a member of the committee that has been formed to fundraise for that bullet vehicle. Today we were supposed to have had a presentation in the afternoon in regard to that. So let me propose that tomorrow, as you're working hard, brother, thank you, Mkoma Spencer. So let me propose to say tomorrow we are going to dwell much on this armored vehicle for our president. So let's talk about it tomorrow. And for today, I'm just saying, those who can put their money on GoFundMe, go put your money there. Those who doesn't want to be here, to be seen doing this, to be here doing that, you can send your monies here. I can collect your monies and put it to the rightful owners, as I have promised that I'm always here to make sure that that vehicle purchase rende ramberi. Anzi nechembereze kumusha kwedu togona musoro, anzi tongoda musoro wachamisa ndopane X yedu ipapo, anzi atitombo tarisi zvizhinji idzo dzakangwara manje. So what we are talking about is our sanctions. The rural folk, they seem ignorant of what sanctions have been slapped on Zimbabwe, and does those sanctions affect them? If they affect them, to what extent does those sanctions affect them? So I want to dwell much on the issue of targeted sanctions and try to teach the rural folk that do not listen to ZANU-PF, because ZANU-PF has to meet certain criteria, has to do certain things for those sanctions to go. And if they do what is required, those sanctions can be removed today. So it's wrong for ZANU-PF to come and tell you that you cannot buy shoes because of sanctions. You cannot buy bread because of sanctions. These sanctions are not meant to stop you from buying bread. But corruption and looting in our country has stopped you from doing that. So what I am doing today is to look intensively into what these sanctions are meant to. So if you look at this type of sanctions, they are adopted and implemented in order to deal with domestic and international crises, as well as armed conflicts. A good example, I've spoken about UNITA, where they had liberated in Angola, and they were slapped with the sanctions because of certain violations. So these sanctions are implemented in order to deal with domestic and international crises. Everything that you have witnessed when President Chamisa was traveling to Masvingo, when President Chamisa was traveling to Bikita, everywhere, that is a crisis that we have witnessed, where ZANU-PF blocked the road, attacked the president's motorcade, and that is a crisis. These are some of the crises where sanctions are slapped or where sanctions are imposed. This was in Zimbabwe. When we look at what is happening, this is already an armed conflict. ZANU-PF has declared war against the people of Zimbabwe. Remember, this is a second dispensation. It's not a first dispensation. And this second dispensation has fared worse than the first dispensation. This is where you see they have declared war against the people of Zimbabwe. They have barricaded roads. they've attacked the motorcade of an opposition president who was going to do his own business that does not affect ZANU-PF. That has got totally nothing to do with ZANU-PF. So already there is a crisis in Zimbabwe that attracts imposition of sanctions. This is exactly why the first dispensation was slapped with the sanctions. So after they were slapped with the sanctions, and when this new dispensation came in, people expected it to reform so that sanctions can be reformed. But unfortunately, they became worse human rights perpetrators than the first regime. This is why you see those sanctions are not going away soon. It's because of the barbaric manner the second dispensation reacted when Chamisa is just doing his own business, doing his party business. So the use of sanctions now entails targeting the political and economic means those individuals or entities and groups involved in. So if you look at when these sanctions were imposed against Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF government has initiated an armed conflict. They used to shoot innocent MDC people. They used to abduct innocent MDC people. And the word is they have held a meeting today to ambush him in 𝗂𝗱𝗄𝗃. Yes. So you will find that the crisis that Zimbabwe faced in the first dispensation was a crisis of terrorism, where the government acted using terrorist tactics to quash the opposition. And they used arms of war, like the AKs, to go and shoot innocent civilians, people who were never armed, people who were not armed. So to United Nations, that is an armed conflict, although the other party is not firing back. The only party that was being fired at is MDC. So sanctions are used in such cases like armed conflicts, like terrorism, like what I've just explained, that ZANU-PF was using terrorist tactics, to the extent that even 𝗥𝗂𝗿, who is probably the information secretary of ZANU-PF, he frankly told the world that they are going to use the Taliban style of terrorism against the opposition in any election. This is not a secret. We don't tell ZANU-PF what to say. They go and score only goals in front of international observers, in front of international journalists. Imagine someone who holds a senior rank in ZANU-PF. He goes on to say they are going to issue a Taliban-style way of election in Zimbabwe. That means we all know Talibans are terrorists. And he is telling the world that he doesn't care about the world. He doesn't care about the sanctions. What he cares for is to unleash a Taliban style of election in Zimbabwe, where terrorism will take center stage. This is a new dispensation that was supposed to denounce the use of terrorism against the opposition. And they are the ones who are advocating for terrorism using the Taliban style of elections. And the Taliban style of elections, we witnessed it in 2008, where people were amputated, these arms removed, legs removed, eyes gouged off sockets, nose cut, ears cut, lips cut. That was a Taliban style. And most MDC people were executed in an extrajudicial killing. So this is the same style of election, style of government that 𝗥𝗂𝗵𝗃𝗺 has proposed for ZANU-PF. And that attracts sanctions. So the rural folk, they do not understand much about these sanctions. And that attracts sanctions. You understand? Threats to peace and security of the people of Zimbabwe attract sanctions. and it is also an international crime. ZANU-PF has been let off the hook for quite some time. They committed these international crimes which should have seen them standing before an ICC court. They have unleashed violence. Sorry guys, can I cut you a little bit? Then I'll come back. Please don't go away. Phone call and saga. I had to answer it to understand. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. There was this crucial phone call that I had to answer. Saga, you see, ladies and gentlemen, that ZANU-PF has committed international crimes, and it was let off the hook, and they are taking advantage of the world relaxing to say, okay, let's give them chance, let's see if they are going to reform. So they failed to reform, and they are now promising more human rights abuses. Sorry guys, Saka, let me continue to talk about targeted sanctions. Targeted sanctions can achieve a number of different goals. This is why you see, whatever you see happening in our country, there are two things that targeted sanctions can achieve. We can classify them into primary goals and into secondary goals. Primary goals can be achieved to encourage democracy. Targeted sanctions are slapped on rogue regimes to encourage democracy. They are slapped to stop human rights violations. They are slapped to stop suppression of internal opposition. They are slapped to enforce peace agreements, to assist the pursuit of individuals for prosecution before international courts, and ensure compliance with the treaty obligations. So these are some of the things that targeted sanctions can achieve. So I'm giving a stern warning. Kuchimpana chinonzi mgwadi chiachia Mr. Sadomba. Ndikupuza Mr. Sadomba. These targeted sanctions, don't take them lightly. They are not going anytime soon, because they have to achieve certain things, to achieve certain goals. The primary goals that I've stated here, including assist in the pursuit of individuals for prosecution before international courts. When you are like ZANU-PF information secretary, you go on television, you go on Twitter, you go on your radio station, you issue threats that Zimbabwe is going to be run in a Taliban style of government, elections held in a Taliban style of government. That means Zimbabwe is degenerating into a terrorist regime, which has been confirmed by senior ZANU-PF officials, and that should be condemned by the world. So one achievement of targeted sanctions is to make sure that those who issue those threats, those who engage in violence, those who engage in human rights abuses, and those who engage in threats to peace and security of the people of Zimbabwe, those who are engaging in terrorism against the people of Zimbabwe, those who are firing weapons like in an armed conflict to innocent civilians, are pursued as individuals for prosecution before international courts. So this is a strong warning to people like Wanachina Masa, Vanamugwadi, who do not understand much the impact of these targeted sanctions. If you look on the secondary goals of them, it is to promote, it is like a way of promoting, of senders' reputation domestically and internationally. If you look at, because these targeted sanctions, they've got a receiver and a sender. Let me be clear here. Those people who are sending targeted sanctions are those people imposing sanctions on you. You are the recipient of these sanctions. So you receive these sanctions. A sanction simply means kurambidza kuita chinhu chaunenge uchida kuita. Andimona, stopping you from doing evil things. No, I haven't shown them. Let me dwell on this 𝗥𝗂𝗿𝗹, then after the cover, then we go on to summarize. We show people certain videos that I've spoken about. So to maintain international norms, because the sender of these sanctions, the EU and the United Nations, what they are trying to do is to maintain international norms and structures. Nyika ino ingada yango nyika 𝗥𝗂𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗀 abaya mumwe ziso akubvisa zino. Makanzwa here zvaitaurwa former CIO guy who was looking for papers in England, that these guys, they used to remove teeth of MDC supporters without anesthesia using pliers. Imagine zino iri arisati rambozunguzika iri mwe munhu ane pliers okutsika huro oridhonza oribvisa. Imagine the pain that the person is going to suffer. And this was confessed by a member of the Central Intelligence Organization. Obvious, those confessions, they make sure that Zimbabwe will be slapped with the sanctions. Because how can you take a pliers and remove someone's teeth without anesthesia? Kana paracetamol zvaya hapana, wotongotsika huro donza zinobvisa. Utsinye hwakaita sei unoitwa nemaCIO. Saka that is Taliban style of government. Yatiri kuthreatenwa nayo nana Mugwadi. Ndori kutaurwa nana Chinamasa that they will unleash against the people of Zimbabwe. And let's tell them that the targeted sanctions will target them. When they target them, they will be pursued for prosecution before international courts. Andimona. Laipa pasina mitemo iyo ma-sanctions. Ingadai so pasina ano maintain international norms and structures. Ingadai nyika ino kungoputitsana kungourayana kuita sei, but the mari vakangwara vanobva vaisa mwe munhu womupa masimba womuti iwo chimbokontrola izvi, tikarega kukontrola izvi vanhu vangapera panyika. Also looking at the targeted sanctions, their goals are to prevent and to contain armed conflicts. Sezvandataura kuti dai papasina mitemo iyoyi yekuti tinozosvika pakurohwa nemasanctions, ngadai nyika ino yara tichibayana maziso tichitana sei, chitana zvaita ana chikuyo chisamarengu chekuti vaingoti vakangosvika vakangofamba ukaona pane mombe dzakanaka wotoenda ubaya vanhu nemapfumo otora mombe. That was primitive way of living during that time, but that today is prevented. You can't do that. So this tells ZANU-PF that you can't do that. There are laws, international laws, that protect the people of Zimbabwe, that prevent you from doing that, that contains those conflicts. Saka mitemo yacho iripo, and mitemo need you to achieve compliance of international laws. Saka ukafaila kuita comply with international laws, you'll be slapped with the sanctions. Let's tell our rural folks that the ZANU-PF government has failed to comply with international laws. This is why you see certain individuals in that party are targeted and are put on sanctions. Because if you look at the international community, it is so concerned about the militia aggression. ZANU-PF used the militia aggression to try and silence the opposition. And that is against international treaties, international laws, particularly the human rights abuses. So those abuses are contained, must be contained. And these people must be stopped. So it is up to Chinamasa to continue human rights abuses. It is up to ZANU-PF to continue human rights abuses. Because this is a second dispensation which we never expected that it will continue with this barbaric Taliban style of government. We never knew that the new dispensation can be more aggressive or use aggression than Robert Mugabe's regime. It is now embarrassing. It is now embarrassing. And that target in Zimbabwe, it is now an embarrassment to the international community. If you look at 2018 elections, a lot of countries like Britain, they put their weight behind ZANU-PF because they thought that E.D. Mnangagwa had learned something from Robert Mugabe, as he spent most of his time as Mugabe's right-hand man. As a result, these countries, they came to try and help Mnangagwa secure victory against the opposition MDC. Because this in Western countries, they are saying the opposition is not organized. There have been splits and splits and splits which cannot take the opposition politics anywhere. So they thought, let's support E.D. Mnangagwa second dispensation. It might reform. But at the end, it embarrassed them. The Americans are so embarrassed with the ZANU-PF. The British are so embarrassed with the ZANU-PF. They supported these people thinking that they might change, and they never changed. This is why you see now these sanctions are like intensified, and more people were added. The likes of Sakundas were added to the sanction list, and I think by the end of this year we will have the likes of Wananik Mangwana, Wanamtuli Ncube being slapped with the same sanctions. And the British, they know Mkoma Arnold. The British, they know that he was the man behind these atrocities, and he is the man behind the imposition of sanctions on ZANU-PF regime. The British are fully aware of that. But now they are embarrassed to come out open and say, look, we supported the second dispensation hoping that they will reform. So this is why you see sanctions are imposed on rogue nations, on rogue elements like the ones found in Zimbabwe. This is to try and settle issues like civil wars. Because as it stands, what you witnessed when President Nelson Chamisa went on a tour to meet rural folks, ZANU-PF praised this civil war button. To them, if we retaliate, automatically Zimbabwe will turn into a civil war. So these sanctions will try to limit this. And if we retaliate, we might find ourselves being slapped with the sanctions as well. So this is the things that we do not want. We have been civil enough to allow ZANU-PF, to let ZANU-PF do whatever they want to do. So sanctions are meant as well to limit the spread of weapons. Sanctions are made as well to constrain international rogue actors. If you look at Shinamasa, he's on sanctions. He's a rogue actor. And this boy, Umpana we China, Umpana we China, akanuna kunge muromo we 𝗥𝗂𝗿𝗶𝗃𝗃 nechina anonzi mugwadi tafadzwa. He has already proved to be a rogue element in our country who should be added to the sanction list. Niki Mangwana wemuromo anenge mhumbu ukatasa Niki wakamboraura hove vakana hove inonzi mhumbu ene maromo ari thick kunga Niki Mangwana ya. He has already proved to be a rogue element in that regime who should also found his name on the sanctions list. This is to try and contain them, to try and constrain them from continuing to unleash human rights abuses. At the end of everything, those sanctions are meant, as I've mentioned, to bring suspected terrorists to justice. If you look at Wanamugwadi, Wanachinamasa, Wanamtuli Ncube, Nana Mangwana, those people should be brought to justice, no matter what. They've earned themselves a dog. They must be brought before justice. So by introducing targeted sanctions to carefully selected individuals and selected commodities, the United Nations and the European Union tried to change the behavior of these people. They tried to steer control of their behavior, because Zimbabwe, as recipients of sanctions, they must change their behavior. So the rural folk must be told that your government hasn't changed its behavior yet. Do not attack Nelson Chamisa. He has got no powers to steer the police of America, to steer European Union police in regard to sanctions against Zimbabwe. He has got no say. So rural folks must be informed that Chamisa has got nothing to do with these sanctions. He has got no power to steer the police of the foreign police of America or European Union countries. Zimbabwe's targeted sanctions, or the police that was put as targeted sanctions on Zimbabweans, these sanctions are ethically correct. They are legally secure, and they are justifiable. I'll explain that as I go along. That Zimbabwe targeted sanctions are more ethically correct, are legally secure, and are justifiable. I'll explain as I go along. But on justifiability, you have seen this violence that we witnessed in the past 1 week against the MDC alliance. That a citizen of a country is not allowed to drive in any road in that country, to go wherever he thinks he is going. He is on his own business. He does not interfere with your business. But you go and barricade the road. You go and stone his car. So this is where Zimbabwe targeted sanctions are more justifiable. And those certain individuals we are identifying, because we are still in the process of identifying the people who participated in that stoning. It's a criminal, they committed a crime, which is Zimbabwe government, for them to be seen as maintaining the rule of law, must hold those individuals accountable. We have got certain people, certain individuals we have already identified who can still be added onto the targeted sanctions, because they cannot operate on their own. Whoever sent them must also be on the targeted sanctions. This is where this sanction mantra is justifiability. Legally, they're justifiable, because that type of behavior must be changed. If ZANU-PF does not change that type of behavior, mark my words, we will all die under sanctions. So these sanctions, they are targeted against such individuals you saw stoning the car, such individuals who you saw abducting people, groups of those individuals who gather and block the road to unleash human rights abuses. Entities, you saw that commuter bus which was transporting those people, it is from an entity. That entity must also find its name on the sanctions list. So these sanctions are targeted against such individuals, are targeted against such groups, are targeted against such people who unleash reign of terror, such entities which provide transport to ferry these terrorists to go and attack an innocent man. So individuals such as military officials. A good example is in Burma. You still remember the issue about Burma, where the entire military officials were put on targeted sanctions. If you look about the weapons traders such as 𝗥𝗂𝗿𝗶, these people were put on sanctions, targeted sanctions. Organizations such as Hamas were also slapped with the targeted sanctions. And there are a lot of private companies like the Iran banks which were sponsoring those terrorist activities. They were all slapped with the targeted sanctions. There are also other certain or particular commodities that can also find their way onto sanctions lists. A good example, if you go to Yugoslavia, they were not allowed to buy and sell weapons. If you go to Liberia, they were not allowed to sell timber. If you go to North Korea, there are luxury goods piled there because they were targeted, because they were being used as instruments of oppression. There are certain regions like I've mentioned. A good example is DRC, in eastern part of DRC. There was an arms embargo there. So, if we try to focus against individuals in Zimbabwe who should be on the targeted list, we should find their names there as perpetrators of human rights abuses. So Zimbabwe, interestingly, must not cry foul about these embargoes. If you look at whatever we witnessed recently, these people, they initiated or unleashed worse episodes that attract sanctions. That stoning of vehicles, that barricading of roads, which the person you are barricading road against is paying tax to the government for that road to be tarred or constructed. He has got every right to drive along that road without anyone trying to stop him, trying to tell Chamisa that you are not allowed to travel that side. People there do not want you. Why can't you wait for him to go there and people don't come to him to show that they don't like him? It's a different issue like what we witnessed. Everywhere Chamisa went, he did not give them sugar. He did not give them meal. He did not give them anything. But the people of Zimbabwe would descend on him crying, President, Chamisa, President. Then someone is saying he is not wanted in the area where people knew and prayed Chamisa. I've seen elderly people. I've seen chiefs. I've seen Masabuku. I've seen 𝗂𝗂𝗶𝗃𝗃 kneeling and praying to Chamisa. And someone is trying to push a narrative that he is not wanted in those areas where people knew and pray him. So what those episodes we witnessed, those incidents, are exactly instances that attracted targeted sanctions during the first dispensation. This is why you see Robert Mugabe died a fuming man. So if we focus on these existing sanctions, the mantra, this mantra, sanctions mantra by ZANU-PF, if we focus on their mantra, if we look at why ZANU-PF push that these sanctions, that so sanctions, this and that, sanctions are determined by a number of factors, which I've even laid down to you guys. And sanctions affect you and me, not 𝗔. 𝗔 is looting more. Achiwanda nema sanctions. Teddy, I am going to dwell on that. You might think that these sanctions are not even affecting 𝗔. 𝗔 has got businesses which are on sanctions. So I don't understand. You personally, do you mean, because your understanding of sanctions is like acute. There is an acute understanding of sanctions. I'm looking at sanctions on a broader scale, not looking at what you have eaten as an individual and what it is eating in his house. And on. You are not on sanctions. If you want to travel today to America, no one can stop you. If you want to go to United States to do business or to Europe, no one can stop you because you are not on targeted sanctions. You are not a targeted individual. So there is no way these sanctions are affecting you as an individual. Right now, as I'm talking, you are here. You are typing. You are here, you are typing. You are on social media. 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗃𝗀 Nanga was not on social media as I'm speaking right now. His company is not there. You are here. You are typing, you are responding. And all. So the impact of sanctions targeted on you and 𝗥𝗲𝗴 are different. The impact is very different. So your understanding of targeted sanctions is acute, which is why I'm trying to teach rural folks to say, look, they don't bother to look for information for themselves. I'm going to talk about that. That is Zimbabwe, as much as we think we are educated, as much as we think we have got a problem, that we've got a dependency syndrome. Most of these Zimbabweans today, they are used in ZANU-PF because of that dependency syndrome. They were born with it. They cannot think outside the box. They cannot think for themselves. They are told sanctions are affecting you because they can't think outside the box. You understand? So their understanding of sanctions is acute, and they need this type of teaching so that they understand. This sanctions mantra by ZANU-PF is going to lead them nowhere. And so the role of Zimbabwe government in shaping the sanctions outcome and this mantra is massive. This is why you see Varakashkana Vakauya, they don't really understand what sanctions are. They never bother to look for information why those sanctions were slapped against 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗃𝗀 Mnangagwa and his people. What about ZANU-PF sanctions on the opposition? This is something that Teddy has to take home. That ZANU-PF, a good example, ZANU-PF sanctions against the people of Zimbabwe. Chamisa has kuvumirwa nezanu kuenda kumusha kwavo kunoona gwara mai vake abvumirwe rodhi inovharwa. Andimona let me read pane nhingirikini imwe yandatumirwa. So let me open my Facebook page to tell you, to show you guys what is really transpiring in our country. Is this the Facebook page that I want? Sometimes my Facebook page that I want this 𝗁𝗱𝗄𝗏. This is not the Facebook page that I want. Shivundu. I want to read something that I received from something that I got from that is not it. No, I don't want to reset my password. I don't want. So I can't access the other Facebook page that I wanted to access. It's very unfortunate. I can't access it. Let's hope. No, I don't want. Let me leave it. Because I wanted to read it, but it's like my password is and because stop. So I was talking about the focus on
What's the password?
I don't know. Go give Clint. I don't know it.
What's the password?
I don't know the password, Ashi. I'm struggling with mine as well.
This iPad.
Mom knows the password and it's just 1%. Go and put it on the charger.
There's no charger.
Alright, go put it upstairs. Bye-bye. Too many Facebook account, too much of a Holy Ghost account. Saga, I'm not going to change this password. So Zimbabwe targeted sanctions are more ethically, legally secure, and justifiable. So if you do not understand that, then I've got no any other better explanation to say that. So in our case, if you look at Zimbabwe, our sanctions were imposed to deal with complex political, economic, and military challenges. And do not waste the time responding to people who have a narrow understanding. Yeah, definitely, they have got a narrow understanding of these sanctions. And they are overfed with propaganda. Propaganda. And sometimes it doesn't help us to try and educate them. Because these people are fed with propaganda. And so, their common understanding of sanctions is devoid of intelligence. And they don't know what are targeted sanctions or smart sanctions. So for us to continue teaching them that these are smart sanctions or this and that, these people do not understand it because they are overfed with propaganda. And they do not understand how these measures are implemented because they are overfed with propaganda. As in the honor, we should all press up opposition. And Saka press ups 50 one hand, 50 the other hand. A lion's hand. Moto cognitive dissonance and confirmation of bias. Yes, this is affecting most of our Zimbabwean friends who do not understand, who lack the common understanding of sanctions. This is why I'm a bit superficial today. I'm playing above their intelligence level so that they really understand. Something. Because my targeted sanctions, my comprehensive sanctions is targeted sanctions are targeted on individual people or certain regions or entities to company. But comprehensive kana yauya aisikuzoya iri targeted. Zimbabwe as a nation has been put on trade sanctions. Zatopera, whether your MDC will be affected, whether your ZANU-PF will be affected. But these senders of sanctions, they have realized that ordinary Zimbabweans are suffering, or ordinary people are suffering in countries where comprehensive sanctions are imposed. So this is why they came up with an idea to say, why don't we implement targeted sanctions? And which are actions initiated by those senders against the actors. And one or more recipient will be slapped with them. But we should brace ourselves for come 2023. I think these idiots can attack our president. What about us, the 𝗂𝗶𝗺? Yes, this is why we are saying, I don't think these sanctions have got punished them enough, these people. Instead of them feeling the heat, they are continuing to attack Zimbabweans. They are continuing with their bad human rights record. And so United Nations imposed the sanctions, if you look at comprehensive sanctions, as I've mentioned, on Rhodesia from 1965 to 1979. These were comprehensive sanctions which were put on Rhodesia. And we try to explain these sanctions even on WhatsApp, but they don't want to understand. Yes, because they are overfed with the propaganda. And so they don't know that greater economic and social hardships would cause compliance. If these targets or targeted individuals suffer economic hardships, if they suffer social hardships, and this can force compliance. So what they need to do is they need to comply with the economic pain that we have felt as ordinary Zimbabweans under ZANU-PF. That should lead to political change. And to them, when you try to teach them on WhatsApp, try to explain issues of sanctions to these individuals who are fed with the propaganda, overfed with the propaganda, they don't understand this. That those people on targeted sanctions, they are not affecting Mnangagwa. I did not buy the point. Because Mnangagwa is feeling the economic hardship, is feeling the economic pinch. Mnangagwa is feeling the social hardship. He's feeling it. Because we are suffering. We have suffered even before sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe. Zimbabweans were suffering. So these individuals must also feel this economic pain. Imagine when you Swiss bank, you can't access that money. You can't travel to buy yourself what you want, luxury that you want, because of targeted sanctions. Because I can't travel to Swiss bank to withdraw money, kuenda ku London, Grosvenor, kunotenga a Rolls Royce, a Lamborghini. This is why you see their monies are in these banks. So if you see them sending these Varakashi overfed with the propaganda to defend looting and corruption, Barda would try to open a leeway to access their monies. Vane mari varumawa dzakavharirwa. Makanzwa mpana anonzi Matanga achitaura kuti mari yangu inini is in offshore accounts. Haana mari haabhenge muZimbabwe. Mari yake inobhengwa kuma offshore accounts. Aitaura akaudza vanhu ega, hapana munhu akamuudza vanhu. Saka akaslepwa nema sanctions, he will never be able to access that money iri kuma offshore accounts. Saka munhu yeye ndiye anenge akumhanya achituma vanhu endai motema chamisa, enda masanctions ngaabviswe kuti iye access mari iri kuma offshore accounts. Eventually, when the government change, that money will be returned to Zimbabwe and put into Zimbabwe coffers. But imari corruption, imari dzekubira vana veZimbabwe. So these individuals on targeted sanctions are feeling this economic pain. They are feeling the economic pain. They can't travel. They're on traveling bans. And demon. So to them, avasina political gain. Both maridza vakashanda vachiba vachunganidza kumabhenge ekunze dzakavharirwa dzese. And they can't travel there to access their money. And more. So Varakashi are overfed with the propaganda. They don't understand this. The rural folks are overfed with the propaganda. They don't understand this. That they are being sent to attack Chamisa, to say, hey, remove your sanctions, so that these people can go and access their loot. Varukushandiswa varumawa, that vadzidzisei. ZANU-PF, if you look at ZANU-PF, it has used this domestic propaganda to redirect the economic pain that they are feeling. These individuals in ZANU-PF, they've used this propaganda to redirect their economic pain against the opposition. Today, they attack the opposition. Today, they accuse the opposition. When they were putting these policies in Mjongwe House, Vachinyora Pasuti, they talked to former Mabesi, want to deploy certain people, want to tax so and so, want to abduct this and kill that one. the opposition was not there. And they pretended not to understand. They are just using sanctions as scapegoat. Yes. When they planned, because all these attacks are planned, you saw them with the printed posters. You saw them being ferried with different cars from different areas to go and attack. So they prepare all these attacks. And when they do that, they don't consider that their actions are being seen, are being watched, and already they are on sanctions. At the end, they feel this pain now. And when they feel this pain, they want to accuse the opposition. They forget kuti Chamisa anenge asipo. Pavanenge vakagara vachitaura kuti takunoataka motikati kunovhara road, takunoti sei imi muchabva nekuku tichanosangana pakati. Chamisa anenge asipo. Hapana munhu weMDC anenge aripo ipapo. And these are only goals that they are scoring. You understand? As a result, vakuda kunzwa economic pain. And they want to accuse the innocent, the victims. They pretend to ensure the hardships whilst they are badly beat. Vari kurumwa nawo ma-sanctions. Vozoda kuaccusa munhu asina kuvabatsira kuplota how to make ma-ambushes, how to barricade roads, how to stone the opposition president. When Chamisa is traveling to go kumusha kwake, havabatsire kuplana how to attack the opposition. Kana varumwa nema-sanctions, vakuti Chamisa. When they are doing this, Chamisa won't be there. So if meanwhile, the recent violence on opposition, it blazes ZANU-PF's understanding of sanctions. It blazes Varakashi's understanding of sanctions. It blazes the rural folks' understanding of sanctions. This is an effort to consolidate its democracy as a sovereign state. Sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe so that Zimbabwe grabs this opportunity to ensure that democracy is initiated as a sovereign state. But if you look at Zidera, to me is an appropriate framework for a meaningful political dialogue. Saka havanyatsouzwa vanhu vekumamisha kuti ukaona pane mutemo unonzi Zidera wakaiswa iwona naUnited States, it is an act that was put by the Americans to make sure that Zimbabwe consolidate its democracy as a sovereign state. Because it makes them reflect on why this act was imposed on us. And those are old school tactics that most African dictators use, just like Museveni from Uganda. Yes, but they forget now that we are in a 21st century. And it is not all rural people who don't know the reason for the imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe. It is the ZANU-PF members who depends on ZANU-PF propaganda to strengthen their political beliefs. Yes, Mkoma Henry, I agree with you 100%. That it is not all the rural folks. But we are targeting those ZANU-PF idiots, Muppets now. They lack reasoning. They do not understand why. Ndosaka vachiswera vachiteerera ZBC. Ndosaka kuona ZANU-PF yakataura kuti hakuna imwe TV station in that country. Kuchasara one TV station inonzi ZBC. And pane mwe musikana wekuKenya akauya akati ndakaona 6 TV stations muZimbabwe. Ndakashamiswa kuti amaya vakaenda Zimbabwe ipi yavakanoona ine 6 TV stations. So the sanctions on Zimbabwe. Come tell me, what do you want?
I don't sit a big thing on.
What?
The TV.
Sorry, you can't switch it on now.
Why?
You have got nowhere to sit and watch it.
Oh.
Okay. Go to bed. When I come, I'll give you my phone. Go to bed and wait for me. Good night.
Okay.
Mwanangu asiwa kuona TV. Night. All right, Daddy. Good night. Oh. And, anyway, let's proceed, ladies and gentlemen. That targeted sanctions have been increasingly utilized by United Nations to address a broad range of challenges. And if these challenges were just left like that, this world would be like a jungle where shumba inongobata nyati yotongouraya yodya pasina any regulation. And anymore. So this is why United Nations had to decide on imposing sanctions on rogue elements like ZANU-PF government. This ensures that there is maintenance of peace and security. The world to human beings must not be a jungle. And Mgoma, thank you, Mgoma Yuda, please continue to help the people, especially the youth. And anonoka kushika msoro wenyaya urikuti. Msoro wenyaya rutara targeted sanctions imposed on ZANU-PF to change and steer or control their behavior. So the rural folk does not understand why targeted sanctions were imposed. So this presentation is targeted or is focusing on the rural folks, and then we need to help them understand what are these sanctions for and why targeted sanctions have been slapped on Zimbabwe and why the United Nations use such targeted sanctions to countries like to individuals that individual like Chinamasa chimpana chinonzi mugwadi chinenge ngoko chachiya chakasviba kuti tsva sei masanctions achiswa kuvanhu vakadayo andimona. So to international peace and security, when they look at sanctions particularly against countries like Zimbabwe, United Nations use them like a counter-terrorism, because we've got terrorists like Zimbabwe government. So sanctions are used as a counter-terrorism to prevent conflicts and to consolidate peace agreements, protect civilians. The sanctions were imposed to protect civilians, to support what we call democracy. If Zimbabwe is a democratic country, then if you look at their actions against the people of Zimbabwe, that the Zimbabwe government's actions against the people of Zimbabwe does not suit the definition of democracy. So if sanctions are slapped on them, then sanctions are there to support democracy. Sanctions are there to improve government, to resource its individual, its people. And they are not there to punish anyone. So ZANU-PF government, they go and preach or overfeed these boys with the propaganda to say Zimbabwe is under punishment. Which is Zimbabwe is under punishment? And so if we have looked everything, that is sanctions, why sanctions are imposed, how sanctions are imposed, and what type of sanctions, was there a range of sanctions? If all those sanctions are slapped on Zimbabwe, definitely that country won't stand, Baba. They should know that sanctions will also help them not to be displaced from their rural homes. Definitely. Because if you look at Chinese today, they just come and peg at your rural home and tell you don't own this land. There is gold here. Come on, get off. If you refuse, they use heavy explosives that have cracked houses, kitchens have fallen, houses have fallen, whilst the Chinese are blasting for gold. So under those conditions, if sanctions are imposed, ZANU-PF should not cry foul. Yeah, ZANU-PF is so radical. It is capable of genocide as Uganda. So sanctions were imposed to stop that behavior, to make ZANU-PF could it reflect and change their behavior towards governing Zimbabwe. So definitely, Mkoma Lord, we should continue to penetrate human rights, rural areas. These type of teachings and videos must be ushered to them. They must listen to what I'm saying here. This is critical for the rural people. Musagare mchinzi wa rural people. Unoziva here kuti ukauya ku UK, you cannot buy a rural house. You can't afford it. In rural areas here in the UK, there are mansions and mansions. You can't afford to buy that mansion. And you can't afford to buy rural homes in UK. But in Zimbabwe, those houses are affordable. Kambake uswa, kakake round kaya, kanguswa kuda musha unzi ndipe $400. Watupuwa musha. You can't do that in the UK. And if everyone was like you, we need more of you. I shudder to understand how people in Zimu will support ZANU-PF. Yes, with this, thank you, 𝗂𝗂𝗿. So we are trying to expose and show Zimbabweans that you deserve more from your government. You don't deserve to be abused. Human rights abuses are prohibited by United Nations. And if you are a nation, you abuse your human beings, you abuse your population, then you are likely to find yourself on targeted sanctions or comprehensive sanctions. And on. So if you see critical aspects considered before ZANU was slapped with the sanctions, if we look critically before ZANU-PF was attacked or slapped with the targeted sanctions, if you look at the two types of sanctions, comprehensive are slapped on a nation. Individual or targeted sanctions are slapped on individuals. Makambani, vanu, njimbo, those are targeted sanctions. But when combined together, kana makusapa comprehensive sanction, nyika yese yakutorwa ne sanction. Asina basa urumchinja, urimzanu, urimchi, dai angari ma comprehensive sanctions ari muZimbabwe. Kutaura kwatiri kuita nhasi ndakagara panapa, I was going to advocate for removal of those sanctions because they will affect me, they will affect you, they will affect ZANU-PF, they will affect MDC. But kana uchita upenyu hwakanaka, usingarove vanhu, usingaatake vanhu, usingabire vanhu, hauna paunoenda pama-targeted sanctions iwayo. So the impact of them is on corruption and criminality. Those engaged in corruption and those who are criminals. Because when I say a criminal, I mean someone arikutuma munhu kunopwanya motikari. Iwe watuma kunopwanya motikari iyoyo. Iwe waenda kunovhara road. You are a criminal. ZANU-PF is a political party of thugs. Is a political party of criminals. Those people who go and attack other people's properties, causing malicious injury to property, malicious damage to property, public violence, attempted murder. All of those were committed when they attacked President Nelson Chamisa's motorcade. So ZANU-PF is a political party for thugs, is a political party for criminals, is a political party for people who engage in corruption. What they just do is to try and strengthen the authoritarian rule. And those people who divert our resources for their own use. Kana vakugadzirira road, unogadzirirwa road ngekuti 2 days kane ma potholes. Ukavabvunza kuti kakaita mari yanzi kakaita 21 million. 6 kilometers of road yakunzi iyo yakaita 21 million. So they divert our resources to their own use. These are criminals slapped with sanctions. Their harmful effects, their effects are harmful to our neighbor countries. Because at the end, you find a lot of Zimbabweans running away into Botswana, running away into Zambia, South Africa, Mozambique, Malawi. And those countries are geared to receive. Particularly if you go to South Africa, you would think Zimbabwe is a province of South Africa. Because every tribe from Zimbabwe is found in South Africa. So it becomes like administrative government yedu ye Zimbabwe. So the effects of misgovernance are harmful even to our neighboring states. Zviri say tatenda mari zviri kufamba here. So you find the increase in human rights violations by this second dispensation, the widespread harmful consequences of whatever they do, their behavior and actions. Now they are trying to force people to rally behind a flag by wearing chisikafu muhuro chinema colors eZimbabwe. Zvese izvozvo are an impact, different impacts on targeted and comprehensive sanctions. So Zimbabwe devised means of evading measures. And 𝗂𝗱𝗏 ZANU-PF ma sanctions, mazokuda, they must reform. Thank you so much, 𝗥𝗡𝗵𝗃𝗀 𝗀𝗎. How come kuti ma sanctions abviswe iyo ZANU-PF isingade kuchinja unhu hwayo? Mapedza mukoma 𝗥𝗡𝗵𝗃. This is where exactly I want the rural folks to understand. Your political party known as ZANU-PF does not want to reform, does not want to change. They do not want to stop using violence against the people of Zimbabwe. The requirements of sanctions are that the ZANU-PF must change. Instead of them changing, they are threatening to unleash the Taliban style of government. And this was said from a senior ZANU-PF official, 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏. And the same statement was echoed by Patrick Chinamasa. These are two senior ZANU-PF officials who are threatening to unleash Taliban style of government in our country. That means they are telling the world that they will never reform. They would rather die killing Zimbabweans, oppressing Zimbabweans, engaging in human rights abuses. Andini maona. Saka kana varamba kuchinja unhu hwavo, how do we expect sanctions to go? Why are they telling that sanctions were brought by Chamisa? Tatenda chawira zviri sei mwana wamai? Because their behavior is what brought sanctions, not Chamisa. So our rural folks must understand that. Ukada kuona what they are doing now, they are trying to evade the measures or the impact of sanctions. If you look at what they do, they've introduced the black market. Black market yamunonzwa iri muZimbabwe yaya. It was introduced by the government. Hakuna munhu anoita black market munyika government isingade. Hakuna zvakadaro. Black market that was introduced by the government. Why? They print money ku Reserve Bank. They give that money to people. Vanhu vavo veku Reserve Bank vachipinda mu black market. Vachinotenga ma US dollars. ZANU-PF government buys forex from the black market. And vanotenga nema RTGS avanoprinda ku Reserve Bank. And ukada kuenda pa black market unoona ma bricks and bricks of new money just printed, minted, just printed from the Reserve Bank. Unoiona pa market, pa black market. So ZANU-PF is a government that introduced that black market to the people of Zimbabwe. And the rural folks must be told that. To them, the black markets are safe havens for them to collect forex. Andini maona. Saka, ukada kuona these strategies even they rely on family members. Ukada kuona vanhu vanonga vachismuggle gold, vachismuggle diamonds, vachita say these are their family members who are not on sanctions. And so ZANU-PF relies on their family members to smuggle gold, to evade sanctions. Makanzwa, Mary Chiwenga is a good example. Akataura kati Chiwenga Constantine ane ma properties ku UK. And those properties ari kutengwa nehama. Achipa hama dzake mari, achita say because he can't travel to UK. in the event that sanctions are removed, he can come and enjoy his money here. Ane mari chiwenga dziri mumabank muno mu-UK. Dzanenge achitumira hama dzake because they are using their relatives to evade those sanctions. Anditi maona. Ukada kutarisa kuti coping strategies anoshandiswa neZANU-PF to evade targeted sanctions. A very good example. Vanoshandisa anonzi third party countries. Akada sena Belarus. Ndara anoflya nendege yakazara goridhe kuenda naye kuBelarus. Belarus ndo ichazotengesa gold on behalf of Zimbabwe. Vanowanawo kasheya kavo mumwe wokupaiwo nemabhazi. But imari igoridhe reZimbabwe ratikadai takatengesa direct. But Zimbabwe, because munhu ari kuda kutengesa goridhe racho ari pama-targeted sanctions, akushandisa a third party. Vanoflya private jets kuenda muDubai, vachinopa vanhu muDubai maagents achivatengesera gold on their behalf, mari dzisiswa kuma-offshore accounts kuma-Swiss bank. Zvese zvomaZimbabweans vanozviziva. And this is the way that these people are coping with the sanctions. So when they come back to you under the sanctions, private jet yakaflya natwabano yakazara goridhe. Vana maititi vachibuda nemabhegi unzi anouzwa asechwe paairport vakatakura ma5-10 kgs egold vachinotengesa kunana America. Andini maona. And these people should be exposed. Saka vanenge vachishandisa tuvanhu twavo tuchismugla gold. Tuchibuda naro goridhe tuchienda zvamusingafungire mese imimi. You see, Saka, this is a way that they try to evade targeted sanctions. Nayo. So United Nations, we all know, we all understand that sometimes kuna anonziyo unintended consequences which can come nema sanctions. But if you look at intended consequences, unintended consequences, if you compare the ones that come with targeted sanctions, Clint, can I have a glass of water, please? Thank you. And everyone, those are to kutaura atete flow. Tuan tukata sana maiti unotokata kura mabegi akana business rakanoita. Akashande akaite sei. Kana kachiswara kachimpeya nemandege kapinda mu-UK kaenda ku-America kaenda kachimpeya kachismugla our precious stones.
This guy doesn't want to go to bed. I don't know what to do.
This is a precious mineral. Do you want water?
Yeah.
Go give him water, Ashi. Bye-bye.
I'm struggling to put him to bed.
Yeah, don't worry.
That mom's room.
Bye-bye, Ashi.
Mom's room.
Yeah.
Come on.
Fridge.
Bye-bye. Go get water. I didn't move the guys. You know too much. I pray God to protect you. I know Zamba. Thank you so much. Saka, you see, these people, they smuggle our gold. They smuggle our precious stones. They go sell to other countries using their relatives, using their friends who are not on targeted sanctions. This is the way that they are evading those targeted sanctions. Although this comes, these two types of sanctions bring or come with unintended consequences. If you look at unintended consequences, there are a lot. But targeted sanctions, they come with lesser unintended consequences, unlike the comprehensive one. So such effects are most prevalent in the case of comprehensive trade sanctions. But they also occur, although in more limited manner when targeted sanctions are employed. This is why you see United Nations, when they look at the situation of Zimbabwe, they say, okay, let's better slap them with the targeted sanctions than comprehensive. Because unintended consequences are too many when it comes to comprehensive sanctions. Saka, mungona vanhu vari kumamisha vachichema, hey, ma-sanctions azodai so, hey, azoita sei, ma-unintended consequences, ma-targeted sanctions, they are very few. What are you doing?
I want
Out. You can't sit here. Out. Go to your bed. Where do you want to sit? All things like this. Come on, out. Please, out. Go to your bed. Go and sit in your bedroom and read. And then Murugunzwa, John, I agree with Arnold. It's great to be knowledge as compared to be in a belief of shit. As it is good to see you with your happy family, Mgoma. Thank you so much. I love my kids. I love my children. I love my kids. This is what I only have in the world. And I wonder why especially the ladies follow people like my Titi and the Madam Boss on social media. Our people have mental derangement. You understand? The problem with the Zimbabweans is they have surrendered their fate to ZANU-PF. Instead, they want other people to fight for them. This is why I'm coming to you as Zimbabweans to say, guys, we've got Mushina Muhombe, President Nelson Chamisa. Why can't we protect him? Why can't we buy him an armored vehicle that will protect him past the 2023 elections? Because obvious, if you look at what the reaction of the rural folk, Vachamisa, Zimbabwe vanotonga. Whether you like it or not, Vachamisa vachatungamirira nyika yeZimbabwe. Because no one is going to determine the fate of Zimbabweans except Zimbabweans. Those in the rural areas, vatakudzidzisa chichinonzi masanctions. Musadonzwa kuti andetovhara road titeme Chamisa nokuti akaunza masanctions. No. Tell your ZANU-PF people kuti behavior yako iyoyo yekuti donza tonovhara road ndo yakaita kuti masanctions ave muZimbabwe. Why are we going to close the road or barricade the road? Ashi, please, bye-bye. Bye. Sorry guys, nimbo buritsa werere dzangu idzi. Because presentation yacho no pesera kwa noise yevana vanhu vasichanzwa kuti chiri kuitika. Adini maona. I problem yevana. Sorry guys, vana vangu vanenge ndika move from this room ndikaenda to another room, they follow. From one room to another room, they follow. So most of the time ndakumira ma presentations ndakutaura nawo and it drains us. We forget because sometimes I get shot at when kana ndapinda mumudu yekuti ndauda kudzidzisa nechita zvinhu zvinoflowa kuitira kuti sate ma breakages kana chida kuzorora nechirwa cup of water naye. Lovely kids, I don't blame them. Definitely they want to be where their father is. Ndopagorora ndofaka vana vangu vanomboti mbomirai kuviga mudhara for quite some time. Because they always want to be near their father. They love their father. I love my kids. I do love my kids. I encourage every Zimbabwean to love your family, love your kids. Vana vako vana chipo chatakapuwa nanyadenga. Kana vachiti chipo Mwari vanenge vachireva vana. Anditi saka ma-targeted sanctions atikutaura nezvavo. Ngatidzise vanhu vekumaruva kuti anonzi ma-smart sanctions from a humanitarian perspective. Haasi ma-sanctions ekuti akaiswa vanhu vanopeta maoko kutarisai muchidya nhongo dzezvironda. America inounza rice, America inounza chibage, America inounza aid, food aid kuzokupai makagara kuZimbabwe vanhu muchingodya. Anditi maona. Saka these are targeted or are smart sanctions from a humanitarian point of view or perspective. Anditi maona. Saka tikada kubvunza mibvunzo kuvanhu veZANU-PF kuti honestly ma-sanctions akaiswa neZimbabwe, akaisirwa Zimbabwe, tikatarisa from ZANU-PF perspective, are you convinced kuti you are suffering because of these sanctions? Tikada kubvunza. Because these sanctions are targeted on regime elements who are making you to suffer. And these targeted sanctions are telling them to stop brutality so that you do not suffer. Those rural folks, Mambuya, they are being whisked from one point to another to barricade roads. This is the cause of sanctions. This is why sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe. Andini murugona. If you ask them, do you believe that these sanctions contributed to your suffering? We need to explain to them that you look at these people. When ZANU-PF comes to you, they tell you that they are being unsuccessful because of sanctions. And they are driving state-of-art vehicles that they come to you to pick you up with. Whilst they claim that sanctions, new vehicles imported from abroad, and they come and tell you about sanctions. Why can't the sanctions stop them from buying those cars? Look at Maduku today is driving a Pollard car. Why did not sanctions stop purchase of those cars to give Maduku? And didn't wanna. Saka, if you ask them, do you honestly believe that the sanctions are contributing to your suffering? Your suffering? The answer is no. If you ask them, if they are convinced that sanctions are causing them to sleep, the answer is no. Ask them, could my sanctions are they making him getting isolated from the people of Zimbabwe or isolated from the world? It's no. Those people who are demonstrating, holding placards, not one of them is on targeted sanctions. The people who are on targeted sanctions are the military, certain military elements who run an abusive regime. And if you ask if all of them are abusive, they tell you we are not abusive. And we tell them you are not on sanctions because you are not abusive. Saka, that's the sad part of Zimbabwe. That the people who are overfed with propaganda cannot understand. They are not convinced. You understand? As Nangoma Joshua Nyamuronda, it actually smells a red that one hand ZANU-PF is making noise about having sanctions removed, while on the other hand they are simultaneously hitting headlines about political violence and human rights abuses, which are the core issues that brought sanctions to them. And they continue perpetrating violence. They continue being abusive. They have got an abusive regime. They cry about removal of sanctions, whilst they are continuing to perpetrate a violence that led to them being put or being slapped with sanctions. Andini mona. Tikada kutarisa, ndakachiseka nhasi panachitarisa. Ndaona ndikati zvakafanana nenyika yeIraq. Kusvika, ndakuzvimba, muromo wangu wakuzvikutaurisa ero, kuroiwa kwao. Ndakataurira mumwe nezuro ndikati honai indingoroiwa. Ndakutosvika 50 years ndisina mbodzidzira kana kuroyawo. Vakomana vanoroya, ndibatsirewo ndimboroyawo please. Ndimboroyawo. Muromo wangu kutozvimba kuroiwa, kurwadzawo pari kuita dai. Kutanga ndarumwa nenyuchi. Kuroiwa. Woman. Kutochembera ndisina kana kumboroyawo. Andina kana hwana andakamboroyawo. Anombochemawo neni kuenda kung'anga kuti ndaroiwa naShepherd. Zvakaoma. As Nateteleni, you are telling the truth, Mr. Yuda. America brings maize to feed Zimbabweans, but ZANU-PF keeps it for campaigns. Yes. As I am sorry in a time. But I was Mkoma John, kuroiwa kwao. Varoya kunroya muromo wakutozvimba. Pamangwana nenda kada ensingataura. Uchirema kusimuka muromo pamusoro. Anditi maona. Saka nyaya yati kutaura panapa. Nachiseka panachitarisa issue yeIraq. As Mkoma Yuda still have a question. Why Passion Jawa shoot a video holding a bar of gold after eating mananga? Arisi rake nati. Arisi gold rake. Anogose munhu weZANU-PF. Anogona kungokumbira goridhe rere kuti ada kuitisa video. Ongoitisa video opedza oridzosera. Because he cannot afford it. Passion Jawa has never worked haana pakambobayirwa chitupa chekuti mungatotaura kuti ane mari akashanda upenyu hwake akatanga bhizinesi rake ayambinga hakuna. Akasiyana nana Ginimbi wekuti vanhu vaiti Mary Chiwenga akatora kambani yashinga akapa Ginimbi, Ginimbi ukaita mari inotyisa nenyaya yekuti aitengesa gasi. Anditi mona uya anogona ngokumbira goridhe riya ndiro Reserve Bank ungoitisa vhidhiyo dzorera haana chake uyo. Hanzi kune varoyi variko here? Variko varoyi vhena hobho varoyi. Ndichakuratidza mumwe, pane mumwe wani wandoziva. Varoyi variko. Inini ndogara ndichikuudza, inini tete vangu, inini hanzvadzi yababa vangu, first born yemudumbu mavo. Pandakaenda kumusha kwedu kuMalawi vakandiudza kanzi usachema kuroyiwa shepherd. Isusu ndisi varoyi vemusha muno. Ukatenderera muno mumangocho vanokuudza kuti isusu ndisi varoyi vacho. Ife ndifafita muno tu. He's a commercial clown. As I remember, 2003, we used to be given matine beans, umamisha, zvichinzi, vote ZANU-PF. Zvakanga zvichibva kuAmerica, zvadonetwa naAmerica for food relief. Andimona. Ivo vochengeta, vofamba vachiti muri kupuhwa neZANU vachidya. Saka you find achitaura nyaya yekuIraq. 1990, Iraq yanga iri pamasanctions. Wadatasa pamasanctions yekuIraq zvakabatsira, it helped a lot that it helped to produce significant concessions in 1993 and 1994 and prevented the regime from substantially building its military machine. Sanctions, they work. Ndakambonzwa maZimbabweans vachiti masanctions hanzi varoyi vari kuno kuAmerica ende havasi kugona neHalloween, kuno kuvazere neHalloween yavo, hanzi ngavaroyi Mnangagwa tivabhadhare. We pray for you, brother. Thank you, Atene Constance. Adidimona. So if you look at Yugoslavia, between 1992 and 1995, Yugoslavia was put on sanctions, and this provided bargaining leverage on the Belgrade regime that helped lead to Dayton Peace Accord. Urugona, ma sanctions anoshanda. Ndakadzwa mwana wachiti ma sanctions ashande. Ayakanga ari ma comprehensive sanctions. America yakanzwa kudzimba. Yugoslavia yakanzwa kudzimba. Kusvika yabvuma kuti aiwa ngatiitei zvinhu zviri pamutemo. Ukatarisa kuLibya, Libya yaizikanwa nekusapota ainzi ma-extremist groups. Libya ndobva yaiswa pama comprehensive sanctions. Andimona. And izvozvo, those sanctions were a central factor in the negotiations that eventually brought suspected terrorists to trial and convinced the regime to reduce support on the terrorist organizations. Because Libya was part of a country that ensured international terrorism, budirira. But comprehensive sanctions, it forced them to concede. When we kuziva the 𝗥𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃 bombing, 𝗥𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃 bombing was a civilian plane that was bombed by Libyans in Scotland. And Libya was put on comprehensive sanctions because of that 𝗥𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃 bombing. And they felt the bite of those sanctions. And they considered that the person who bombed it was arrested and eventually tried to face, As I've mentioned earlier on, that sanctions can be used to pursue individuals who engage in terrorism. Chinamasa kuti vazofesa justice. It helped in Libya during the 𝗥𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 bombing, where suspects were arrested and tried for what they did. In 1986, yes. So you find that Libya was put on comprehensive sanctions, and eventually they agreed. They were convinced that these sanctions would wipe Libya, and they stopped supporting extremist groups and international terrorists. They stopped because of sanctions. In Angola, sanctions were initially ineffective. Like if you look at the Zimbabwe situation, people of Zimbabwe today are crying that sanctions are ineffective. But ZANU-PF has never changed its behavior. Thank my brother Stephen Jones. In Scotland, yes, Lockerbie bombing of 1986. 1986. So you find that in Angola, initially sanctions were like they were ineffective. But as time goes on, people started seeing the effects of sanctions, particularly on UNITA. That rebel movement is no longer existing. The UNITA is no longer there because of comprehensive sanctions. If you look at Cambodia, sanctions helped to isolate the Khmer rogue regime. And today, Yugoslavia is Cambodia, quite peace. There are other countries where sanctions did not have a much impact. For example, if you look at Sierra Leone, Haiti, and Somalia. So to me, ladies and gentlemen, let's educate our rural folks that is, sanctions are best understood as instruments of persuasion. To me, I don't see sanctions as an instrument of punishment. But I see, according to whatever I read here about Iraq, Yugoslavia, Libya, Angola, and Cambodia, look at Sierra Leone, Haiti, Somalia, you will find that the results of the sanctions were sort of a persuasion. So sanctions, to me, according to me, are an instrument of persuasion rather than an instrument of punishment. Most of the time, sanctions are crafted to avoid adverse consequences. This is why you see they are crafted to avoid terrorism. They are crafted to avoid human rights abuses. They are crafted to avoid corruption and looting. If you have got looted wealth, one way or the other, it will be returned back to the coffers of the state. So if you look at the history of sanctions, it seemed that they are there. Ladies and gentlemen, history repeats itself. Just read most of this literature in regard to sanctions. You will find that history continues to repeat itself. So this is the end of that history. When history repeats itself, the end of the First Republic, this is the end of the Second Republic. Because there was end to Mugabe's regime. And definitely there is end to Mnangagwa's regime. As it was so said to use Mambuya to carry that freaky dirty deeds. Definitely. So the end of Mugabe's regime was crafted by sanctions. Targeted sanctions. They made sure that the Mugabe's regime melted. And how did the Mugabe's regime melt? It was because of Zidera. The Zidera targeted sanctions in 2001. They were implemented in 2001. Zidera passed at the height of Mugabe's violent land reform program. Mugabe, pakata land reform program yake, nopakava paro wane Zidera ipo paya. 2000, it was crafted. 2001, it was implemented. That was during the spate of bloody political violence following Zimbabwe's 2000 parliamentary elections. And those parliamentary elections, they showed Mugabe that you have lost majority. And after Mugabe had even lost the referendum, he went on to lose majority in 2000. And they initiated that blood land reform program, which the Western countries used to draft sanctions against Zimbabwe. Dopo wakaita yainzi Zidera Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act. Anditi maona. And Anzi itori dissertation at the PhD yamuri kutaura izvo kuti students in humanities and social science can take this topic of sanctions and how it contributed to the meltdown of rogue regimes. Thank you so much. Ngava tonyora wafana at least ngava listen to this. Inini ndechida kudzidzisa vanhu veZimbabwe kuti vanyatsonzwa. Vanhu vekumamisha ndo vatoda kudzidzisa. kuti pamakaona when Zidera was passed, it was at the height of Mugabe's violent land grabbing campaign and the spate of bloody political violence following Zimbabwe's 2000 parliamentary elections, where Mugabe lost the majority. When Mugabe lost the majority, akatoona kuti 2002 election, I am going to lose. Ndo pakatanga hondo dzisinga nanhasi dzatinetsa. Andini mona. So poverty makes it impossible for democrats to strive. Ukada kuona kuti democracy yedu yakunetsa munyika because of poverty. Tichitarisa poverty yedu yakabva kupi from this blood, spate of blood political violence. Iyoyo yakakonzera ma land grabs. Pakafa vanhu vakawanda, ma blacks, ma whites, nembwa dzaitemwa dzichifa, mombe dzaitemwa dzichidyiwa, vanhu vachita mabhesi vachinorova vanhu mabhesi, vanhu vachipfurwa, vanhu vachiurawa. Pakaurawa vanhu vakawanda siteri kune ZANU-PF. Andiri mona. Saka ndo pamakazoona pakazoiswa inonzi Zidera. Haina kungouya, haina kungonyuka iripo. But because of this violence, which was blood, following the loss of ZANU-PF's majority in parliament. Saka rukona act yakaiswa ipapo. It was a very simple act. Yakanga act yekuti IMF, ana World Bank, African Development Bank, ma bank SA wao, they were supposed to stop extending loans or cancelling debts to Zimbabwe. Zvikanzi muri kuvapirei mari. Ukada kuona Mugabe's regime, it was like a dependence syndrome. Zimbabwe kuti economy yayo ifambe yaitokwereta mari. Tingaite economy yekurara tichingokwereta. Toswera tichikwereta, kuvata tichikwereta, tichingokwereta. Hapana patinozonziwo tine mari yedu yenyika. Mari dzedu dzese kukwereta chete. Saka you find kuti kana pakaya Zidera, it was easier for the Western countries to cripple us. Because we have got a dependency syndrome. We rely nekukwereta. Hapana patinotiwo ichi ndechadu, upenyu hwenyika yeZimbabwe kukwereta kubva ichizvarwa kusvika nyika yakuvharwa. Tinenge tichingokwereta chete every year. Hanzi kumamisha hakuna dzidziso iri kusvika. Zvakwana saka ZANU nepi atifane kupedza atete vhena. Tinofana kurova ndima yacho yese tipedze pa video 1 iyoyi. Yekuti kana akaiterera nhasi akamira anozoterera mangwana omira, paanoipedza upo anenge ane understanding of what are sanctions. Ndosaka toda kudzidzisa kuti vazive kuti chonzi ma sanctions chi. Kune vamwe vedu panapa vanga vasingazive zvandiri kutaura. Vanogona kubatsira nehama dzavo dziri kumamisha kuti chinonzi ma sanctions chi. Yudha akataura zvakati, akati zvakati, akati zvakati. Andiri muona nyaya tiri kutaura. Saka mukatarisa Zidera, it was there because of this blood campaigns, this land grab, which has brought Zimbabwe to its knees today. Pakabva pataurwa nema-Americans vakati ivo varume, iyi nyika haichagadziriki. Iyi nyika iyi ngatitoisai mutemo wekuti vari kuipa mari yekukwira kutenga motikari, vachikwira vachinoponda vanhu, vachirova vanhu, vachiita motikari dzekuabhudhakitara dzevanhu, ngavambomira kuvakweretesa mari. IMF yakamira, World Bank yakamira, Africa Development Bank rakamira. Loans were stopped from being extended. Zvikwereti kudhara Zimbabwe yaiti ikakwereta painenge yaona kuti takwereta stereki, vonochema kuti please vokanzurirwa zvikwereti. Zvakanzi this time zvikwereti zvavanazvo ngavabhadhare, don't cancel their debts. Andimona. Saka you find kuti mu 2002 UK and the United States of America, they even convinced their partners to impose similar sanctions on Zimbabwe due to countries' worsening political situation. Nosparozona wana European Union vakabva vaita join in. Ma member states vakati aiwa, we are going to freeze kana even ma assets amunawo ekuno kunyika kwedu kuno tinofreeza bozi muri mbavha. Andakaona Ustalos achibvunza imwe mbuya kuti chinonzi ma sanctions chi, mbuya vakagomera ivavo. Saka tati regai tivabatsire kuti vauye vanzwisise kuti pavanozobvunzwa nana Ostalos kuti chinonzi masanctions chi votaura kuti chii chinonzi masanctions. As let me tell you the truth, violence or no violence in 2000, ZEDERA was always going to come. It was never going to come. I've never heard you, Mkoma, talking about Zimbabwe before relationship broke. No, it was never going to come. Because ZEDERA was crafted soon after that violence broke. Ipapo. Nopaka craft was ZEDERA. Ikazoiswa 2001. This is when it was implemented. And it took America and Britain or UK a long time to convince their other member states with no. Zimbabwe igai kwa iri kuendeswa neZANU-PF akusiri ndiko. ZEDERA was enforced by George W. and Tony Blair. That's why Bob was like, keep Britain and I keep Zimbabwe. So because it was because of the worsening political situation where even Mugabe addressed his youth to say, I will unroll my military machine. Why would you unroll your military machine against an armed civilians? So you find that this ZEDERA was invited by Robert Mugabe and his minions because he went on to address a gathering to say, I'm going to unroll my military machine. What for? This is an election. You went into an election and you lost majority. And the people went to vote with a ballpoint pen. And you want to use military machine to go and attack people with ballpoint pens. You understand? That attracted ZEDERA. That attracted ZEDERA. Because we were towards 2002 elections. And on. So if you look at the implementation of ZEDERA, it was to try and strengthen democracy in our country. To show Mugabe that don't be violent. Why can't you let democracy take its tour? It was to promote human rights. So tell this, ZEDERA was meant to protect your rights, your human rights. So that if this military machine is unrolled upon you, you're protected. You understand? So it was meant to improve Zimbabwe's regulatory guidelines. When they put regulations, then they will consider that there is an act which is there for us to improve, for our economy to improve. Objectively, it was to induce change in the regime's conduct. Because a president of a nation cannot stand before a nation and say, unroll my military machine. To where? For what? So, to induce change in behavior. And these Western countries had to draft an act to make sure that there is change in this regime's conduct from inside. And they wanted Zimbabwe to do a transition to democracy and promote economic recovery, which today these people cry. And the same promise that were made by Robert Mugabe, that I'm going to unroll my military machine on the electorate, is the same process that Mugabe is using and Chinamasa is using. To say we're going to unleash a Taliban style of government, and you expect ZEDERA to be removed. You expect sanctions to be removed. So those Mambuya who are being used to barricade roads, please, why can't you approach Chinamasa and Mugabe? They must approach Chinamasa and Mugabe, who are using Mugabe's vitriol language to say, or venom to say, we are going to unleash a Taliban style of government in Zimbabwe. That is an only goal. When you are crying that sanctions are affecting you, you go on to score many goals against yourself. And you are telling the world that you are going to unleash a Taliban style of government in Zimbabwe. That is not going to work. Instead of you to see a transition from this rogue element into a democratic country, into a democratic part. Instead of you promote economic recovery, you are denting the efforts of the first or the second dispensation. Even if we say the second dispensation meant to recover the economy of a country, that will never happen under such mantra. So if you look at Zimbabwe authorities, they are contended that the so-called centered sanctions are monetary sanctions. To them, this is why you see they take people to go barricade roads. But these are monetary sanctions. Instead of them being centered to see or promote economic recovery, to see a transition to democracy. This is why Britain had to sponsor ZANU-PF, had to support ZANU-PF. In 2018 elections, they believed that the authorities would preside over a transition to democracy, a government that will see transition to democracy, a government that will lead to promote economic recovery. And today, nothing has been done. IMF iri kutipa 1 billion. Andimon, ndosaka muri kuona now, you cannot get loans. World Bank cannot give you money. IMF cannot give you money. African development banks cannot give you money. They can't give you money. Because you are not even keen to see democracy in our country. You are not keen to see economic recovery in Zimbabwe. Andimoro, saka makuona pavakatanga kutaura vachiti hey, sanctions azotura, but they thought these were monetary sanctions, which is no. Saka muri kuona pa 2008 paya United Nations, United States, European Union, it released a statement and it claimed that sanctions were no longer directed to Zimbabwe. Because initially the wording meant that this country was on sanctions. And EU said, no. That was a wrong interpretation. And okay, let's rephrase this. And they said the country, the sanctions now are on specific individuals, to mean that they are now targeted on certain individuals, not to be seen as harming the economy. Those ZIDERA is not an attempt to harm Zimbabwe economy. It's an attempt to see transition to democracy. It's an attempt to see promotion of economic recovery in Zimbabwe. This is why they call it Zimbabwe democracy, to see that we need to see transition to democracy and economic recovery. They want to see promotion of economic recovery, and this becomes an act. And Wanagumamisha do not understand that. They seem like they are writing what they know. The wording of the act will tell you that we want to see a transition to democracy. We want to see promotion to economic recovery. That is the wording of ZIDERA. And they are telling you that Zimbabwe, we want to see transition to democracy. Zimbabwe, we want to see promotion of economic recovery. And let's make this an act. So ZANU-PF is required to do certain things to fulfill the act. It's a very good example. Yandokupa Prison Act. You know, Taura, how the prison will be managed. The discipline of prison officers. What is expected of prison officers to do. So that is an act. And this ZIDERA is an act that is expecting Zimbabwe that is expecting to see transition to democracy. It is an act, Mutemo, that we want to see promotion of economic recovery. Quite a looting and corruption. As long as you continue to loot and go and cry and say sanctions, ZIDERA will never be removed. Because it's an act that will never be removed. But it's an act that monitors the transition to democracy and the promotion of economic recovery in Zimbabwe. So your interpretation of monetary sanctions, that's a wrong interpretation. Zimbabwe government is trying to tell ignorant rural folks that this is a monetary sanction. In actual fact, this is a specific individual's who are targeted. And it is not meant to harm our economy, and it does not harm our economy. Our economy is harmed by looting and corruption. And they take those mbuyas kumamisha kuenda nawo kunovhara road to come and protect our looting, come and protect us. We want to continue to do corruption. That means you are not implementing what Zidera wants you to implement. So no matter how much, even if you ask ma profit akaita sekuwaunganidza, they won't remove this Zidera because you haven't met the requirements of that act. Andimona. So what we witnessed during President Nelson Chamsa's tours of certain places is like we were witnessing a doomsday scenario where Chamisa went under attack. War veterans, youth militias coming to barricade roads. It was like a doomsday. You don't know for Chamisa nasa apera. And it won. So it's all up to you, ZANU-PF people. It's all up to you, ZANU-PF government. Please, dzidzisai vanhu vekumamisha chokwadi chatiri kutaura pano. Dzidzisai vanhu vekumamisha zvatiri kutaura pano. That ZANU-PF has introduced what you call a dependency syndrome since independence, whereby ZANU-PF relies on financial aid for economic growth. A very good example, when we entered into a second dispensation, E.D. Mnangagwa hired a private jet and flew all over the world. Paidzoka pacho pese aikutaura kuti ndapuwa 2 billion neChina, ndapuwa 1 billion neTanzania, ndapuwa 8 billion neBotswana, ndapuwa chi. That is a dependency syndrome. Our economy cannot be centered on dependency syndrome. We can't always survive on financial aid. No. We are a country that is supposed to be innovative and producing things that we sell for our economic growth. But we have got a president who believes in this dependency syndrome. He flies everywhere. Zimbabwe survives on credit. Zimbabwe survives on credit facilities from international lenders to inject into the economy. This explains why sometimes we lack foreign currency, why we don't have our own currency. Because tunaenda ku China, topuwa 2 billion, tunaenda ku Belarus, topuwa 1 billion, tunaenda ku Botswana, topuwa 8 billion. That is a dependent syndrome. We shouldn't be doing that. As Zimbabwe, kutanda botso chaiko. Because Mugabe introduced this dependent syndrome, where we all relied on financial aid. Until today, nothing changed. Nobody gonna idiaga manya because aneka dependent syndrome ka bobo kai. Noga manya na kupasiresere nyika ne private jet acho achinyepo ndani mabhirioni akati. Hapana chakabuda. Andimona. Unlike during Ian Smith's regime, Ian Smith aive under comprehensive sanctions, total sanctions, ma-sanctions anoisirwa nyika. Aripa ma-sanctions ipapo, Smith regime stood on its own initiative. Anga asina this dependent syndrome. This is why you see Zimbabwe pound was 1:2 ne British pound. British pound rakarakato sara riri pasi pe Zimbabwe pound during Ian Smith regime. Because anga asina this dependence in syndrome, aive ne initiative yake. Ndopa kuona even Mugabe paakaona kuti arohwane Zidera, instead of kuti aite implement what the Zidera requires. Akabva atanga kutaurira vanhu kuti hatina basa nana Zidera wavo. Let's look east. Ndobva atointroduce yainzi look east policy. He struck certain deals with East Asian countries. Mari dzaipiwa, it was just a dependent syndrome. Wekuti you are now looking east, because you can't get financial aid now from these countries like supporter or along. But ukatarisa UDI yanga ine ma-trade sanctions from 1966. Zidera is just a financial sanction nekuti uri kuzi itai zvakati tokukondinya kupai mari, because we have got a dependence syndrome. Vakazviona toda kudependa navo stereki. Andiri mona anzi akanga yes, thank you. That you cannot say military embargoes. Smith anga ari pama economic sanctions. Those economic sanctions anga akaslepwa ne quite a number of sanctions. Smith military embargoes aivepo but was under trade sanctions. Smith anga asikabvumirwa kugadzira chinhu chaanotengesa kana kutengesera dzimwe nyika. Anga asina nyika yaidyidzana nayo Smith, aitodyidzana neSouth Africa chete. Ndosaka uri kuona Smith aiti kana ida fuel yaibva kuSouth Africa. Fuel yeZimbabwe yaibva kuSouth Africa. Kana pakapiswa matengi eZimbabwe, motikari dzakanga kuzodzima matengi Eustace wanga uri mwana mudiki dzakabva kuSouth Africa. Those were trade sanctions, Eustace. As Bob looked east and now he is begging the EDs to meet and even endorsing them. And all Smith was under trade sanctions. Hakuna chaibvumirwa kutenga nekutengesa kunze kwenyika Smith. And from 1966, including those military embargoes. And aya atrikuona ma financial sanctions. Otherwise nharo dzaungatoita Eustace ka inharo dzekuti ma trade sanctions kana ma military embargoes ayaya, compared them to financial sanctions. Ma financial sanctions have far-reaching repercussions than trade sanctions. Because Zimbabwe is a country that survives or relied on financial aid. When you are put under such financial sanctions, then they have got a repercussion. No argument chet yaungatokwanisa kuita. Andiriona. Saka ukada kuona edu ma sanctions isusu akamisa financial aid because takaita fast track land reform program na 2000 yakakonzera kufa kwevanhu, vanhu vaipfurwa nemasoja, vanhu vachipfurwa nemapurisa, vanhu vachiabductwa vachinourawa. Smith anga asingabvumirwe kutreda. Enda unoverenga Eustace zvakanaka. Smith anga asingabvumirwe kutenga kana fuel kupi. Fuel ya Smith yaibva kuSouth Africa. Yaibva muSouth Africa fuel ya Smith. Anga ari pama trade sanctions Smith. Yaibva including ma arms embargo. Anga asingabvumirwe kutenga pfuti. It's just like Zimbabwe today. Iri pama targeted sanctions but ine ma arms embargo as well. Ndofunga dai wanga waripo pandatanga presentation ingadai wakuziva kuti ma sanctions aya anogona kuimplementwa akawanda, not just trade, not just armed embargoes, akawanda ma sanctions. Ukada kuverenga Zidera inogona kubuda nemazhinji uchifunga kuti they are just targeted. Saka if you see Zidera, it was implemented when the economy was already rapidly descending. Ndosaka wachiona achinzi ane ma financial repercussions because patakarohwa neZidera 2001 Zimbabwe yanga isati yatombowana kana benefit yainzi ISAP iyayi. Economy yeZimbabwe yanga yatoita nose dive kudhara. Saka paakabva azonzi go nema sanctions Mugabe akuita look east where the sun rises. Akataura yakati I don't want to look west where the sun set. Andiriona. That was a very stupid statement from a learned man. A man with 7 degrees who told the nation that I'm going to look east where the sun rises. I no longer need to look west where the sun sets. And his son, or Zimbabwe's son, has not risen. Since Mugabe looked east policy until today, our son never risen. It is remaining set. Saka ndizoti zuva rinonyura kumabvere zuva here, handizivi. But zuva reZimbabwe harisati rabuda. Hapana muZimbabwe nataona chiedza muZimbabwe. Hakuna. Saka ukanzwa mazano achinyepera vanhu kuti sanctions destroyed Zimbabwe economy, vaudzei kuti muri kunyepa. Mukanzwa vachiti masanctions akaudzwa navaChamisa, vaudzei kuti muri kunyepa. Pakaiswa zidhera, Chamisa anga asiri president of the party. Saka vataurirei chokwadi. There is this misconception that Chamisa brought sanctions to Zimbabwe. There is a misconception that Zimbabwe's economy was destroyed by sanctions, which is not it. Because when sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe, when targeted sanctions were imposed on certain elements in Zimbabwe, our economy was already rapidly descending. It was nose-diving. And if you track back, it was corruption, mismanagement of a country. And it is Saka second dispensation, it must tell the people the truth. Kuti pakaiswa zidhera, vaChamisa was not president of MDC. And vachangirai havana kubva vambokumbira chinhu chinonzi masanctions. Handiti mona. Saka Zimbabwe has failed to fulfill its obligations or its expectations. IMF wanted them to pay back. The World Bank wanted them to pay back. Yamakazona china masa achibuda tabhadhara, tapedza tabhadhara, waibhadhara chii? Iwo chinyepera vanhu kuti nyika yaurawa nemasanctions. Because mama akuti hari kubhadhara zvikwereti zvamakaba, muchitora mari kuvanhu, muchibhadhara zvikwereti zvenyika. Andimaona. The problem is we still have that dependence syndrome. Where if we think America ikaramba kutipa chikwereti yatove mhandu. Saka murataura still today, the second dispensation iripo iyi. It has worse human rights record than the previous regime. Matataura yenyu mukoma John kuti masanctions akakumbirwa navaZvobho. Vanhu vekumamisha ngavaudzwe chokwadi. VaZvobho 1978 vaChamisa vasati vazvarwa. VaZvobho vakaenda kuUnited Nations vakati kuUnited Nations, tiri kukumbira kuti munhu nyika inenge yariga maelections, nyika iyoyo ngairohwe nemasanctions. Vanhu venyika iyoyo, vakuru vacho vari mudecision making, vasabvumirwa kupinda mune dzimwe nyika nenyaya yekuti vanenge vaba maelections. VaZvobho vakadaro. Chamisa wasn't yet born. I think 7 years, gore raitaurwa naZvobho izvozvo, I was 7 years old. Chamisa wasn't born. Saka udzai vanhu vekumaruva chokwadi kuti Chamisa haanei chekuita nemasanctions. Vataurirei chokwadi. Maplakads ari kunyorwa, hapana chokwadi chiri kunyorwa paya. Vanhu ava, they are just fed up. They are just fed with too much propaganda to the extent that they can't use their own reasoning and discretion to ask themselves to reflect, is this true what I'm writing here? Ndosaka muchiona vana Yuda kana tauya taakutaura chokwadi. ZANU-PF must tell the people that we have engaged in human rights abuses for too long. This is why Zidera is there. We have got political intolerance. This is why Zidera is there. We abduct and kill people. We don't want Zimbabweans to freely travel to any place they feel like they want to go in our country. So ZANU-PF has got political intolerance. That political intolerance, Irim second dispensation, which was still there in the first dispensation, has attracted sanctions. This is why Zidera is there. There is absence of rule of law in our country. In the old dispensation and the new dispensation, there was just transition from old to new, but they still maintained absence of rule of law. If there was rule of law in our country, we were going to see those mbuyas and sekurus, magogwaya and youth zvakabarricade road arrested. Today, they were supposed to be in court for public violence, malicious damage to property, and attempted murder of the people they stoned. But those people, they were never arrested. And when Zidera was crafted, this was one element that was looked into by the Western countries to say there is absence of rule of law. And up to today, ZANU-PF cannot refute that. They have never implemented rule of law in our country. And the second dispensation is worse. It's worse than the first dispensation in regard to rule of law. Vanhu vakatorwa videos, vanhu vachipfurwa vachitiza nemasoja. No soldier was even arrested and tried for killing innocent civilians. So that is lack of rule of law. People just barricade the road. That's a lack of rule of law. People stone people's properties and destroy them. That's a lack of rule of law. People stone people, kill people, no one is arrested. That's a lack of rule of law. So there is absence of rule of law in our country. Sanctions cannot go before you address the rule of law. And so ZANU-PF generally is hostile to democracy, which means Zidera they avasikuikudza. Because Zidera ida kuona transition to democracy. Zidera ida kuona promotion of economic recovery. And you cannot promote economic recovery under circumstances where people barricade road, destroy properties without no one arrested. Absence of rule of law in our country. And so everything focuses on ZANU-PF's hostility to democracy. They are hostile to democracy. So if Zidera suggests that you guys must correct these ills, and if you don't correct the ills, the sanctions won't be removed. So for sanctions to go, taurirai vanhu vekumamisha chokwadi kuti sanctions aende. ZANU-PF has to look into Zimbabwe human rights. They have to address that. They have to address their political intolerance. They have to address the issues to do with the rule of law. They have to stop to be hostile to democracy. If they address these ills, sanctions will go. So why can't we teach the rural electorate, the rural people, that murikushandiswa mahara nevanhu vasiri kuda kuti nyika inake, vari kukutakurai nemotikari kunotema dzimwe motikari. That is mimi muri kutokangasa human rights evamwe vanhu. Vanhu vari mumotikari dzamuri kutema, vamuri kutema ivavo vane right to famba muZimbabwe kuenda kwavanoda vasina hindrance. Who are you to stop them? Andimona. And kana mavastopa vanhu vemuchivatema muchipwanya motikari dzavo, munofanirwa kusungwa nemapurisa. Up to now, not even one culprit was arrested for malicious injury to property, attempted murder, and public violence. Saka there is absence of rule of law. Zviri kunzi gadzirisai neZidera. Saka munoda masanctions ati abviswe maitei. Hamusati magadzirisa izvi. You are continuing in the second dispensation to use violence more than the first dispensation. This is why takubvunza vana America kuti madi henyu mangoita macomprehensive kuti ZANU-PF inyatsorira. But so far havasi kufila the impact of it. Because honestly tikada kutaurira chokwadi, ukaenda kuUnited Nations, America ndo ine a big size of vote. America ine influence yakanyanya, particularly kuma international financial institutions, nokuti ndo inopa aid yacho. Ukaenda kwa IMF, America ine vote yakanyanya. World Bank, America ine vote yakanyanya. African banks, America ine samari yayo yakanyanya ikoko. So ndo vane influence yekuzoti anopuwa mari ndiani, asingapuwe mari ndiani. Imimi Zimbabwe moti tushe muchinotuka ma-Americans acho, but you need credit facility. Aibude. Muri kunzi imimi gadzirisa human rights record renyu tupe mari imuri kuramba. Murita worse than what is required neZidera. Political intolerance yenyu yanyanya. Absence of rule of law in Zimbabwe is the center of the Zidera. Imimi, so generally you are hostile to democracy and you expect kuti hanzi zvichabviswa masanctions achabviswa. Havabviswe kana musina kuita address all these ills. Ndosaka muri kuona Smith akaenda achichema musodzi achitaura kuti never in 1,000 years will this country be ever run by a black man. But those sanctions dzakatsvaira Smith. Although sanctions akamurwa hard, Smith, he could manage to keep an economy intact and running his country fair and fine. Sanctions have a good rate of success, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of achieving desired outcome. So the desired outcome during Ian Smith, although I ran an economy sound, intact, my sanctions akaita kuti abviswe aende pa negotiating table vasaine kulangest house kuti kuti Smith aende kuti Smith abvume kupinda mu-election iri free and fair. Smith akarohwa akadyiwa akaenda. And there was too much external and internal aggression during Ian Smith. Kwakune repression of democracy. There was like terrorism in our country. But zvese izvozvo Smith zvakamusiya akagara patable akabvuma ma-elections aitwe. Smith akadyiwa akabuda akaenda. Hanzi Elvis, they don't feel the impact, plus we still have the support from them, Bill and the Melanda Foundation, malaria support, then paper is giving funds to eradicate TB, HIV. Yes, because it's because artisipa ma comprehensive sanctions, we are getting this. Zvekutaurwa namukoma Elvis. Saka ivo ndo mari dzavari kudiveta. Hadzichaende kuzvipatara ku-HIV and TB. Hadzichaende kunobatsira vanhu vane AIDS. Andimaona. Dzakutorwa, dzakuiswa kupolitics, dzakupiwa ma$10, akupiwa zvifana zviya kunzi 𝗀𝗿𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃 shepherd. Ukaona panorara chechigwite chechorara mashe. Kana chakunyora pa Facebook apa, chonyora ngechiri kubuda mansion. Andimaona. Saka I'm calling upon all the academics. I'm calling upon all the political activists and activists of human rights. I'm calling upon all the journalists. You have to listen to this presentation and you have to teach rural electorate the truth. Because if we don't tell them the truth, if you look at the second generation, as I've stated earlier on, there is continuity of repression and social injustice in our country. And Maraska Mkoma, teach yourself more about sanctions and imperialist foreign policy. This is murikure nenya yema sanctions. Yatiri kutaura iyoyi ndo nyaya yacho yatakadzidza iyoyi. Kana pane mumwe anofunga about imperialism, we are no longer in an imperialist era. Zvakatosiyana. Zvakatosiyana. Zimbabwe has been 42 years independent, and it's wrong for Zimbabweans to dwell in the imperialist mantra. They've been writing that. They've been writing their own history. They've been running that country away from imperialists, vaishandisa communism. Hazina Mkoma Emmanuel Nyashimbo, very educative presentation, say Yuda. I know. Thank you so much. So some people, they want to teach us about imperialism. We have lived 42 years under communism. We were not under any imperialist influence since 1980. And someone is coming back to try feed us poison about imperialism. Zimbabwe government is crying today for sanctions to be removed so that they can travel to imperialist countries. They have got their political system they call communism. Since 1980 up until today, they have been singing communism. Communism. They never sang about imperialists. And there must be differences, notable differences between an imperialist and a communist. We have lived 42 years under a communist government. And they should have lived by their communism. But they never. Zimbabwe economy from 1980 to up to now has been run by communists. There was no an imperialist involved. Mugabe is not an imperialist. Mnangagwa is not an imperialist. These are the people who were at the helm since 1980. Saka, CD, and I know these are food. And I know these are food. These are proper history of Zimbabwe. That from 1980 to up to today, Zimbabwe has been run for 42 years under communists. It was never run under imperialists. There is no imperialism in our country for the last 42 years. Hapana imperialist akambo rana Zimbabwe. Yairanwa nema communists. Saka dzidza endano dzidza futi zvandiri kutaurira. This is why you see communism is the one that introduced this repression we are talking about. This is why you see there is continuity of repression and social injustice after the fall of Robert Mugabe. There is absence of rule of law after the fall of Robert Mugabe, which are criminal acts. There is political intolerance after the fall of Robert Mugabe. This is documented in various forms, which if you want, I can show you right now. There is poor Zimbabwe human rights record, even after Mugabe fell. Mugabe introduced communism in our country. He never introduced imperialism. So if you want to read about Mugabe, go talk about imperialism. Mugabe never introduced imperialism in our country. Never in a day. Zimbabwe has been run for 42 years under communist government. So if you look at this Second Republic, their mandate is the one that is being forwarded here by my friend. He is talking about Zimbabwe's resources under an imperialist government. So this guy is saying Mugabe was an imperialist, which I say no. Mugabe was never an imperialist. He was a communist. And Zimbabwe has been run for 42 years under communism. Saka sometimes my state or types of government are not going to confuse alano. Could I understand the difference between communism and imperialism? You're not going to kunetsa sterek. Taizviona tichita history tiri kuma form 2. Ndakapesera ta history ndiri form 2. Tichitaura about the communist China. Tichitaura about the imperialist Britain. Ndaitapirirwa tichitaura history yoyo. Vanhu vakafunga kuti pamwe ndichave a historian but zvairamba ndaisimuka ndichilecture history imperialism, ndichilecture history yecommunism class inini. Ndo matheories avaishandisa mukoma Stephen Jones, thank you. Vaishandisa matheories ana Lenin, the Leninism. Zvatakaita zvazvia kuma form 2 tichiverenga about the Soviet Union, tichiverenga about the Leninism. Zvinhu zvatotaura panapa zvinhu zvatakaverenga kudhara kuma 1988. Vamwe panapa vanga vasati vazvarwa. Ndichitanga form 1 1988. Vazhinji vanga vasati vazvarwa ndiri kulectura Leninism panapa. Communism yaMugabe. Mukanzwa vachiti ndisi macommunists. Vaifamba vaitaura maimperialists ati akatoona kuti mhandu macommunists. Maimperialists. Handiti mona. So what I'm saying here, tine problem. The Second Republic has got a conquering mindset, which is the communist chatukutaura nezvacho. What do they believe in? Or this mindset, they treat Zimbabwe's resources, including land, as their rightful property and inheritance. This is the problem with communists. Saka ndikutaurira bururu wangu kuti haisi imperialism. Mugabe never introduced imperialism in our country. He introduced the communism, where he says the resources of the country, they belong to them. They think they've got their rightful property is Zimbabwe. ndosaka vachiona vachiti kana vakataura vanoti nyika yedu, vanonzwa vachitaura kuti hapana anovabvisa vamurambwi ivo vachirambwa, because to them they've got this conquering mindset and they believe that the Zimbabwe is their property. They don't believe that Zimbabwe belongs to Zimbabweans, but because they went to war to fight for it, then they believe it's their property. And that mindset is communism. Saka batsirai mumwe wedu kuti ndo chinonzi chicommunism ichocho. Lenin is the father of communism after toppling the Tsarist era. Antoda kudzokera ku form 2 history. Bururu wedu mudzosere anoverenga form 2 history. Iyoyo ndo ingatomubatsire kuti understand what is Leninism. So this is the mantra of this Second Republic. Vaneka conquering mindset kai kekuti they treat Zimbabwe's resources as and land is their rightful property. They don't believe that this country belongs to Zimbabweans. And anymore. So if you look at the crisis in Zimbabwe today, it impinges upon the interests of Vanu, the Zimbabwe. That's where the crisis is. When it impinges upon your human rights, then this attracts significant internal involvement. Nosaka muri kuona taane problem yekuti every country in the world is now looking into what is happening in Zimbabwe. Chii chiri kumboitika munyika yeZimbabwe. Andiona? So there must be a common understanding yatiri kubatsira Bururu. Kuti chatiri kutaura panapa chakaiswa nana Mugabe ndo chanzi chicommunist. Vaimba ranzi mhandu makomunista ruzaire. Ukaveterera kasong ikako hanzi na Jason Midzi edmi. Problem iri apa mukoma Midzi. I problem ye volume. If I add you, the volume goes. As mukoma Yuda add Jason, please leader. Who ZPP. Problem is about volume general. I think you really understand it. I think you really understand it. Anidi. Saka nyaya iripo ndeye kuti ukaterera kasong kakaimbwa na Chingsingayo kuti maruza ere vapambe pfumu, maruza ere vapambe pfumu. Hanzi vaingoti mhandu mucommunist. Chavaita introduce into Zimbabwe was communism. They were never introducing imperialism. As we don't do aid here and ikoko. Pakaipa. Saka because adding, and there's a volume, Eustace knows it. Even if I want to add people, the volume goes. Saka we don't want to struggle with hearing. Vanenge vachida kuedwa vane comments avanoita nyorai comments ipapa ndinomaverenga. Ndinomaverenga. Saka comment munonyora ndokuverenga. Eustace knows the issue of volume is the one that affects us when we try to add nezuro, because chataida kutanga nezuro taida kutanga neku dai Midzi auya ndamuedha patotanga in green patinotanga so that the volume does not go. Saka tinomuedha pekutanga kona tapakata kupedza presentation tomuedha it goes away. Andona. Saka let me just present ndakunopedzesa we try to add Midzi timbonzwa kuti vane ipi nyaya varida kutaura. Andinimona. Saka nyaya tataura ema-sanctions dzidzisai the rural electorate kuti pane anonzi ma-actions initiated by one or more international actors. Ivavo ndo anonzi masenda ema-sanctions. That action is initiated against one or more others, and those people are known as recipients. So vana America, nana United, nana Europe, ivavo they are senders. Zimbabwe is a recipient. And in Mona. Saka the purpose of my sanctions is not to punish the receiver. No. It's not to punish the receiver, but they are to induce a change of attitude. So what they are simply saying is these receivers must comply with the certain norms, must comply with the certain or important things that the senders have put. Kana waita nharo iwewe, gara wakadaro. Mukanzi isai rule of law, isai rule of law. Chamunobva chi kuti shepherd akamira panze apa akavhara road, motikari dzikapfuura ndikatema motikari dzevanhu ndosungwa nepublic violence. Chamunobva chi kana mukasunga shepherd atema munhu nedombo momusunga. Ndikarova munhu echibhagera mondisunga. Saka chamunobva chi ipapo mukasunga vanhu ivavo. So you guys, ZANU-PF, you must simply comply with the certain requirements and norms. If you don't comply, then the sanctions will remain there. Sanctions are not going anytime soon. Because makwira pamusoro pechuru, machema, yo, where kuno maridza mere. My sanctions are easy to implement, but difficult to remove. Because when they are to be removed, you have to meet certain requirements. We've got individuals, but my travel bans. We've got individuals who are assets are freezed. And those assets frozen and in the travel bans, they can't be easily lifted. Because makwira pamusoro pegomo machema, kuchema kwenya hakuna zvakubatsira. Musatema motikari dzevaridzi. Musatema motikari dzevaridzi. Musatema. Don't ever attack people. Chamisa is a Zimbabwean, has got right to go kwaanoda. Kana nasida urara kumasvingo, it's his right. You have got no right to stone his cars. You have got no right to stone him. Kuti wafambire waendere kumusha. Andimona. Saka that attracts sanctions. You definitely deserve to go on travel bans. Because why are you banning Chamisa from traveling? Why? And vanhu vacho vese vamuri kuona ipapo hapana ari pamasanctions paya. Wotanga simkaita because masanctions inini handisi kubvumirwa kuenda kuSouth Africa kunoshanda. Handisi kubvumirwa kuenda kana kuBritain kunotenga chingwa. Why tine maminista ezano asiri pamasanctions vana Nick Mangwana. Vanotravela kuya kuzoona bhora kuno. Vana Gwamombo vanotravela kuya kuzoona Arsenal 50,000 pounds yekuya kuzoona Arsenal nekudzoka one game. Iwo wotemera Chamisa masanctions. Why can't you stone that one arudya mari yako? Andimona. And we need to buy you a phone. No, phone ndinayo. Don't worry. Phone zemuno Eustace. My phone emuno UK, they are for free, no badra service. And on phone andinayo imboma usaichikira. Problem ndiye Facebook. And on. Unofana Eustace by now you wagara mu UK steady. Unofana ku understand as my websites is. Unofana ku understand how websites are opened, how this social media operates on our WhatsApp. Zvinhu zvaunofana kuread kuverenga uchi understand. It's not about the phone. Because the phone update. As a good teacher did. Thanks, sweetheart. Because the phone is update. Ukatenga Samsung NAS. Ukatenga Samsung ichaburitswa kusura mangwana. You will find the same apps dzaunoshandisa pa phone yako ndo dziri pa same apps iri kushandiswa nemunhu ane AZ. Saka it updates ma software yacho update every time and then. Saka don't worry about the phone, get worried about why Facebook ichitika takuedha munhu volume inoenda. It has got nothing to do with the phone, unfortunately. So you see, most Zimbabweans are on travel ban. Individuals, not the state. Nyika yeZimbabwe ndosaka uchiona Mnangagwa ari kuuya kuno ku-UK. Anodaidzwa kuenda kuAmerica. Vana Nick Mangwana akada kusimuka kuuya kuno kuzoona mhuri yake anouya hapana anomumisa pa-airport. Because haasi pa-travel ban. Haana asset freeze. Ane ma-accounts munomu. Mari dzaanonoba kuZimbabwe anongouya usa ma-account yake munogara muno. Mhuri yake iri munomu. Saka dzidzisai vanhu chokwadi vekumaruva. It's nothing to do about Chamisa. Thanks Jimmy. Ana Jimmy Chamisa ndewe social media. Ngawamusiya aite zvaanoda ko muri kurwadziwa nei. Nemukomana. Vaitaura kuti Chamisa is a social media president. Chamisa tapedza naye. Chamisa apera asina zvaachaita. Akangofamba, Chamisa akafamba. Haatakure 5 kg yehupfu nerice kunopa vanhu. akasvika panapa vanhu vanokoromoka makomo kuya kuzomhoresa. Hanzi foni dziripo, foni dzirimo munomu. Ndakakuratidza wani Eustace. Ndikatenga Tesco's line, ndikaisa iPhone 8 yangu yayi. Ndakaigadzika ndichifuna kuratidza ndichikupai nhamba. Not even one person Ford. Why should I continue kuita zvinhu zvokuti vanhu havadi kushandisa Eustace? It was my phone, my line that I paid. Ndakatosvika pakurasa Tesco's line racho. Ndatoona kuti it doesn't pay. Hanzi vakatema mota. Vane majerasi ekuti vakanyanya kushandiswa nezano zvekuti havachafi vakagona kutenga bhara. Ndo chokwadi. Anditi moyo, brother, leave this decoy. Thank you so much. Let me continue and tipedze panapa. Saka ndachitaurira Eustace ndikati we've got a lot of sanctions which can be imposed. Azvireva kuti kana waimpozwa one type of sanction unogona kuimpozwa 10 types of sanctions uri one. The purpose of these sanctions are to coerce behavior change. Munofana kuchinja unhu hwenyu. Kuna anonzi macomprehensive anachitaura ayaye, trade and financial bans. Iwayo they need positive inducement, anopa a conditional offer. Kwa anonzi targeted trade actions, kwa anonzi targeted financial actions, kwa diplomatic pressures. Akawanda a lot of different type of sanctions that can be implemented. Kuna reversal of the positive inducement chayo. Andimona petroleum kuti unogona sanction kuti haubvumiri kutenga kana diesel kune imwe nyika hauna, unogona kuzvamburwa nemasanctions akadaro. Anditi maona zvakawanda masanctions anopinda Eustace zvekuti kana newe unorohwa neana. Kuna anonzi masectoral sanctions ekuti arms embargo anga achitaura Eustace, they fall under sectoral sanctions. A good example, yanga iri UNITA yanga isikabvumirwi kutenga zvombo. That sector UNITA yanga yakatovharwa havabvumirwi kutenga zvombo. They were banned to buy weapons because of human rights abuses. Kune nyika dzakabvumirwa na South Africa during the arms embargo, they were not even allowed to buy and export weapons. No, mamwe anofana kurwa Zimbabwe because Zimbabwe abuses my weapons. So they must be put on arms embargo. So they cannot buy or sell my arms of war to earn. Mamwe anorohwa pamasektora panorohwa sensitive materials, shipping, all services equipment yayo anenge achinzi havabvumirwi kutengesa. Because anonzi commodity atukutaura iwayo kuti ana petroleum unogona kurambidzwa kana kuimpota oil chayo. Zimbabwe haifaniri kutombobvumirwa kuimpota kana nyere. Because they use those firearms to shoot and kill civilians. And ukatasawa na Liberia, they were barred from selling their timber, from exporting it. Those were sanctions. Because they are financial sector sanctions amunawo enye kuzimba. Investment kuramba. You cannot bank your money with my offshore accounts. Anofrizwa. And more. Saka there are quite a number of sanctions Eustace atofana kudzidzisa vanhu vekumaruwa kuti vasangomhanya vachiti sanctions iyo havasi patravel ban. Hapana kana munhu wekuruzevha wandakanzwa achinzi ari kurambidzwa kuuya kuUK. But ndakatoona government yeZimbabwe ndekutoramba kuvapa mapassport. Why can't you tell them the truth? That it's not about Britain. It's about your government yeZANU-PF. Ukaenda kuita passport hauiwani. Hauifa ukaiwana passport muZimbabwe. Saka arikuisa masanctions ndiani? Is it Chamisa iranodhinda mapassport? Chamisa has got nothing to do with the passport office. That is the duty of a government. And muZimbabwe hauiwane passport. Saka masanctions api arikutaurwa ipapo. iZANU-PF government ere kana ndiChamisa. Andiona. Ukaenda nhasi muZimbabwe kwakabhaniwa maby-elections. Ndichamisa ere akabhana maby-elections? Ndiye akaisa sanction remaby-elections ere? Because ukada kuona masanctions, maby-elections aya, they reflect the truth of the state of politics in Zimbabwe. ZANU-PF iri kuona kuti tikaenda kuma by elections tinozvamburwa ese, vana Monzora vanozvamburwa ese. That will bring confidence into people. Saka ukada kuona ma by elections ekuti constituency inosara isina member of parliament for 2 years is unconstitutional. Saka what I'm saying here is new dispensation or vana ED government, they are so terrified about Chamisa. It's not about COVID, what. They went to South Africa to kunogadza president aka-electwa during COVID time. Anditi mona. Vanhu vari kunzikwirai mazupu mabhazi vachiungana, vanhu vayo hakuna here COVID. Saka zvikarambidza here kuti kuitwe election izvozvo. So this is why I am telling you that ZANU-PF is so terrified about Chamisa. This is why you see they barricade the road wherever they go. Wherever Chamisa goes, they barricade the road. They stone his vehicles. They stone his people. Because they are so terrified about Chamisa. It's not about sanctions. And the idiots being used on ZANU-PF is terrified attitude. They don't know this. They just dragged under my sanctions. What for? One was asked by Ostalos. Chamlons, nzwisisa kuti ma sanctions chi akatanga kuumana. Akatanga kuumana kana. Akubvunza zichozi ma targeted sanctions chi. Anora. So it's now that one wangwari panapa kana wanga vasingazive now. They really understand the difference now between targeted and comprehensive sanctions. That comprehensive, the difference is that one type of sanction is discriminating and the other one does not discriminate. If you look at the targeted sanctions, they discriminate because they point at individuals. But what I can admit, Panap, is targeted sanctions are very difficult to implement. Akasiyana ne comprehensive. Comprehensive mnogona ngoti ga nyika yese. Apana nyika yachina chaichaita. Yatomira nyika yoyo. But targeted, you have to go down. They entail like decisions about who to target. That's how difficult they are. How to limit unintended consequences. Because there are quite a number of consequences that emanate from targeted sanctions. So if you are to implement them, you have to know the limit of unintended consequences, the decision to how to target those people. So there must be a strategy on how to suspend or lift them in the event that unintended consequences arises. And more. Often these situations, they consider what is exactly happening on the ground. So these are very difficult to design and implement. Ukatona nyika yakutaura yakurwa ne targeted sanctions, panenge paitwa a lot of considerations. And more. So the design measures that most directly affect the political leadership responsible for decision making. These targeted sanctions, they target those leaders in a political environment who are responsible for decision making. Someone who decided to take those mbuyas to go and attack President Nelson Chamisa. And those people are easy to identify and can easily be put on targeted sanctions. A good example, Mdara Insanyatwa oya msoja oya. Aka deploy presidential guard akanouraya vanhu. And it was easy for these senders to target him. And he is now on targeted sanctions. And more. So targeted sanctions, again, they require a detailed knowledge of internal political dynamics of a country. So they are not easy to implement. They are not easy at all to implement. Because they must focus on specific individuals, the people we call designated individuals. Vakadasana china masa. Vanhu kuti akashama so nhunzi dzinopinda mukanwa make nokuti pamwe toothbrush achatombozivi kupinda mukanwa machina masa. Andiri maona. they are supposed to target certain entities, selected firms or business entities. Akada sana anatagurei makamba anatagurei aya. Saka targeted sanctions as well, they are supposed to target sectors where they are going to restrict trade to the entire sector. Zvakaita taishitaura tikati zvakaita kunge arms embargoes all in diamond and so forth. Zvinhu zvekuti sector iyoyo inogona kutargetwa. Andimona. Regions of a country can be targeted. Political parties can be targeted. Non-state actors can be targeted. Saka chitaura vana Eustace kuti wafana imimi ingadai makaswa sanctions mani. Wafana vana Eustace ingadai vakarwa sanctions awo. Because non-state actors but vari enablers of human rights abuses. Saka wafana vaifana kunzi nema sanctions nga wafana ivavo. Anditi more. I'm not iwewe in general, Eustace, but what I'm saying is there are certain enablers of human rights abuses who we long to see on the list of targeted sanctions. And more. So if you see at comprehensive sanctions, they are not targeted in this manner. They are entirely put on a nation to stop everything that I've... These are blanket sanctions. Comprehensive are like blanket sanctions on an entire nation. Saka vanhu vekumaruva vanoda kudzidziswa. Vanhu vekumaruva havasi kuziva zvatiri kutaura. Vanhu vekumaruva they lack knowledge. Vanhu vekumaruva vanhu vanoda kuti vaudzwe shomanini. Hanzi vedu musadaro general. Generally vaifana kuve varipo pamasanctions tichiseka so kuti chinamasa hasha dzachinamasa dziya ndizekutadza kuya kuzorapwa kwaanofanirwa kurapwa. Andimaona. Saka naiwaya kana pane vanoda kubvunza tisata Edha Mukomamidzi kuti timbonzwa nyaya dzavari kuda kutaura. Timbonzwa. And I am on sanctions. What are you talking about, Ngoma? I'm blacklisted, marked as extremist. Haiwa, usama sanctions, Eustace. List racho tinaro. Kana pane munhu akakunyepera dokasa ma sanctions mudzo kuti haiwa uri kunyepa. Not list racho tinaro. Tikuziva varipo. Vana Joyce Mujuru vakabviswa kudhara havasipo paya. Anditiwaona. Saka usanyanya utya zvako. Isusu ndisakasa ma sanctions neZANU-PF. Kunzi uyo mupana haatsike muZimbabwe. Anoona vanhu vari pamasanctions ndana Yuda kwete iwewe. Isi takatonzi ngava masanctions. Vana chamisa vakuswa pamasanctions ekunzi havafambe muZimbabwe. Saka don't worry Eustace, iwewe hausi pamasanctions. You can go to Zimbabwe. Unotenderera zvakanaka hapana anokumisa. Wodzoka muUK hamuna anokubvunza. Look at vanhu vakaita sana Rurama ivaive. They go and come back. Despite that she's an extremist, a terrorist, a person who supported terrorism, a person who even directed the killing of Zimbabweans on the 1st of August, a person who even directed the killing of Zimbabweans on the 2nd of August. Hanzi akapuwa chigaro kuZANU-PF chekuti ndiye security officer anenge achitaura vana nanga God urayai nhingi kuZimbabwe, and people were shot and killed because of Rurama Mashingaidze. Those are terrorists. And those are the people we long to see on targeted sanctions. And we are not going to rest until they are put on targeted sanctions. They to lie with Hanzi Shinyanga is a terrorist whilst they were terrorists. And we have got evidence of their terrorism. And it won. Imimi wana Eustace haiwa don't worry. Dayongo report yakatokudza mfana udhara kuti uripo Hanzi Madimu Komayuda sei pachando. Lawrence ndakanaka mwana wamai. Saka ndichika ndasvika tapedza kudai. Tenge takuda vane mubvunzo tipindure. Pane muchinda anga achinzi Midzi. Vaenda kupuwa Mukomamidzi. Dzinenge dzaramwa. Ndakachidzira kuti dzibva dzauya panapa. Because ukada kuona kwakutonzi vachamisa kunana Chipinge kwese kwatodaidzwa vanhu unzi uyai titeme chamisa. Andikuri kunzi uyai titeme chamisa. Vapedza apo tanzi chamisa ari kuzvimanikidza kuno addressa vanhu hasi kuda kuaddressa hasi kuno addressa vanhu chamisa. Akasvika pa growth point inokoromoka yega. Yega. Saka it's very unfortunate kuti pavari kufunga kuti chamusari kuenda ikoko hatisi kumuendesa ikoko, takumuendesa somewhere else. Ikoko tozosvika mavarairwa. Handiti neattitude yenyu yekuda kudya vanhu, yekuda kunwa ropa yemasatanisi, we are going to make sure our president is safe. Ndofunga nhasi ndapa dzidziso yakanaka kuti vanga vasingazive masanctions vaya vazive masanctions. Regai ndichitsvagira ngoma vaive veimperialism, imperialism versus communism. Regai tichingovapa madifferences acho topedza nawo. Is common knowledge that you can Google from the Google. Hanzi matishu ayo haasi kufamba chii zviri kuitika mungoma. Akawandisa kune mamwe azero ku akawanda ngamapedza here. Akawandisa. Adini wala. Saka hanzi if we compare, regai tione this is public knowledge. If you want to compare imperialism and communism, hanzi definition ye imperialism timbobatsira mukoma vai vanga vachitaura takazviita 1988 nchitanga history ndopatakaita zveimperialism nana communism tichita zvana leninism ndakazvisiya 1988 chitanga form 1 ndozvataiita izvi. Imperialism is a type of advocacy of empire. Imperialism is a policy extending a country's power and influence through colonialization, use of military force or other means. No definition here imperialism. Yekuti vano influence is through influence of colonization, then use of military force and others, which you even saw that in Zimbabwe there is use of military force and we cannot probably ndopasa anga achiti pamwe it's imperialism kuti vana munangagwa ma-imperialists. If you go to Oxford Dictionary, a policy of extending a country's power and influence through colonization, use of military force and other means, this is what we call colonial imperialism. Cambridge Dictionary, it is saying a system in which a country rules other countries, sometimes having used force to get power over them. So if they look at the British, they call the British imperialists, because according to Cambridge Dictionary, it says a system in which a country rules other countries, and sometimes having used the force to get power over them. So in other words, imperialism, if they look at the British, they went to Zimbabwe, used the force and took over power in that country. Saka vanda kubatsirwa vakuru vaya, if we go by the Cambridge definition of imperialism, vanda kubatsirwa kuti pakauya mabhunu, pakauya ma-British ku Zimbabwe, handingati Zimbabwe, pakauya ma-British ku Africa, ndo vakasvika vakaintrodusa nyika inonzi Rhodesia. Kwakanga kusina nyika inonzi Zimbabwe, kwakanga kusina nyika inonzi Rhodesia. But these people, they came, pakaitika the scramble of Africa, vakadraw a map yatoshandisa yamoti Zimbabwe today. It was drawn by the British. Ndo vakaisa kuti nyika inonzi Zimbabwe. Saka if we talk of imperialism during that time, I don't think the definition will be fair to be used in regard to our situation. Because when they came, there was nothing like Zimbabwe. Munema machifi vakavharirwa munyika imwe chete, vakanzi this whole region is now called Rhodesia. Saka if you call these people imperialists, I'm not sure whether the definition will define that. This is according to Cambridge Dictionary. Saka regati tarise a definition of communism. Advantages. That was a definition of communism. No kona kuishaya pana. Sena ne bawa. No kona kuishaya pana. Definition of imperialism was a basic component to the conquest of Genghis Khan during the Mongol Empire and other warlords. The Americans during the pre-Columbian era also had large empires such as, I'm not sure whether America in an empire in Africa. Mondi batsirao, because pandakatanga kuverenga history yeZimbabwe reform 1. Kubva bati grade 1 chita zvana chaka, zvana ani zviya zvana mfekani, zvana dingani. Tichizokutaura nekuuya kwakaita mandevele kunorth vachizosetla ikoko. Andina pandakambonzwa kuti mune nyika muAfrica which was colonized by the British. I mean by the Americans. Never in a day. Mondi batsirao, pamwe ndokupotsana nayo literature iyoyo. Andenda mbo zinga stress zami inoshungurudza. Alright, well. And so generally, a new type of government is established, whether it's either alternative pharaohs to fulfill the needs of citizens. When a type of government is established, the positive attributes of the previous government are retained, whereas the negative attributes are changed. Similarly, imperialism and communism. Regarding the definition of communism. Shit. Chikuramba kundipa communism naye. Musanjara unogona kuishaya ka. Oxford, regarding the Cambridge Dictionary, definition of communism. This is the type of government in which the society without different social classes exists, and all the members control and own the methods of production, and everyone has to work to get what they need. Is called communism. This is the theory that Mugabe has used ever since 1980. And if we go with this definition of imperialism, it does not apply to us. Because pakauya mabhunu, vakasvika kusina Rhodesia, vakasvika kusina Zimbabwe, vakatanga kupega, vachidrowerana, vachibvutirana kuti uya nodapa, indodapa, maBritish akati soda pedu apa. Ndobva vanyora, ndobva vaisa Harare, vakati iSalisbury, ndo capital city yedu, and this country is Rhodesia. So I don't know where force was used during that time. I don't know. Because even if the Zulu people, when they came from southern region coming to settle in north, they was also fighting. And they established their caliphate. So I don't know if we call them imperialists. Some definitions do not suit us. So when they came, because the Zulus came, they settled in the north, they conquered that area, because they were warriors. Can we call them imperialists? So some definitions do not work for us. Chirungu ichi. America na pamwe yakanyorwa neshona. Saka Cambridge iri kutaura ichiti, the type of government in which the society without the different social classes, kuti kuBorodale, uku kuMandara, uku kuKambuzuma, those are social classes. So the type of government in which the society without different social classes exists, and all the members control and own the methods of production. If you go to Zimbabwe, chicommunist yada kuiswa na Mugabe chakafeila. Kusvika izvo tine vanhu vakatiza vezanu veMDC vechi vakatiza nyika vari muno muUK. Vamwe vacho vanonzwa kuti tine mapurazi kuZimbabwe, une purazi uri kuno. Rukurimwa nani. Andirimaona. And everyone has to work to get what they need. Is called communism. A type of government which common ownage of the goods exists and they are available to all. So the goods in Zimbabwe, they are not available to all. The goods in Zimbabwe, they are not owned by the Zimbabweans. We have got 3,500 farms which were shared among the ZANU-PF people, and the rest did not get anything. So we don't own means of production in that country. So for Mugabe to say it was a communist country, it doesn't suit into a communist country as well. If we try to say an imperialist country, the British, when they came, they found no one was running that area as a nation, but there were pockets of chiefs who were there with Munumtapa, the Great Zimbabwe, Ndebele people with the Bulawayo, then different chiefs who were incorporated to form a country known as Rhodesia. The Rhodesians did not remove their powers as chiefs, they kept them as chiefs. Ukatoenda saka waiona uchinzi unoenda kwa mambo Kazangarare, unoenda kwa mambo Chundu, unoenda kwa mambo Binga, unoenda kwa mambo Mbire. The British kept that social work. And imperialism and colonialism is different. Yes, those are ndrukutaura panapa Eustace. Kuti Mugabe wanted a communist type of government, and the British, we are accusing them of running an imperialist type of government. But I have gone through the definition of imperialism. It does not fit into because when they came, there was no Zimbabwe, there was no Rhodesia. They had to draw a map to form a country. So this country was formed by the British, and we had to use force to take over that country to run it. And it won. Saka, some definitions do not work for us. Mama theories do not fit us. Those are what you wanna in dragons, vanhu vanoverenga bhaibheri vaiva ndofane kuseka zvangu kuti munhu anoverenga bhaibheri which is meant for Greeks, chapter which is meant for Greeks, and interpret it kuti it refers to our situation in Zimbabwe, which doesn't work like that. And on a day like this, I keep my notebook and a pen on my side the whole presentation. Thank you. So sometimes if we look at the imperialist definition, trying to suit it to our situation could not work. If you look at the communist definition, which Mugabe wanted to introduce, try to suit it into our situation, it doesn't work. Because only few ZANU-PF people own the production instead of the whole country, instead of everyone, instead of for people to work, produce, and earn something. The means of production in our country is in the hands of few. Mugabe was going with the Nkrumahnism, Pan-African. That's the problem now, that he had to borrow the Pan-Africanism from someone who had his own belief. Mugabe could have led by his own belief. The problem with these theories, you try to enforce them where they don't suit. This is why murikuona takunwa sewage munyika medu. Takunwa sewage munyika medu. Zimbabwe today haisina chainomira chichiti chinde chayo. Yakumira ichiti chinde chaChiwenga, ichi ndicha Mnangagwa, ichi ndecha Mugabe. And vana Mugabe vaitora mari dzacho vachienda nadzo kuma imperialist countries. That's where they were banking offshore accounts in Switzerland. Vachibenga munana Britain, vachitenga ma properties kuma imperialists. When they come to you, they say, oh, these people are bad, they're imperialists. But when they are doing their holidays, they don't go to 𝗥𝘂𝗿𝗹. They don't go to Masvingo, Great Zimbabwe. They come to Queen Elizabeth's country, kuma imperialists, to enjoy the money. They build houses, they buy houses here. They buy properties outside Zimbabwe. But these people are the same people who are preaching about how bad imperialism is. As ngoma ide kana uchida kupasa history tamba pano, not bhuku rako unobuda ne straight away. Kubatsirana Mkoma Lawrence. Kuti vazano vanzwisise. Chembere dziri kumamusha dzinzwisise. Kuti nauro yatiri kutaura panapa is a skewed history yakaitwa neZANU-PF. Ava vanhu vari kumusha havatomboziva kuti nyika yavo yavari kuti Zimbabwe nhasi chakatodhirowiwa nemaBritish kunzi chatera iyi mepu iyi ndo ichange iri Zimbabwe, ndo ichange iri Rhodesia. Havatozivi vanhu vanotema chamisa nemotikari kuti tara yavari kuvhara vachitema chamisa yakasiyiwa naIan Smith watiri kuti muimperialist nhasi. Communist akauya akatadza kusatara. Mucommunist aripo akanosatara yakata 2 days yakanga yaane mapotholes. Tiri kunwa sewage munyika medu vachikwira maprivate jets kuenda kuma imperialist countries. They are banking mari kuma imperialist countries. Voya vochema ma sanctions. Panzori vataura kuti hatisina forex muno mari takabayese takaenda kuma offshore accounts. Vakuya vakutaura kuti sanction razodi. A stupid person unovhariswa road onhongeswa dombo rakadai kutema motikari yavachamisa. Andimona. Ndapedza. Diriwo rairo. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rarembanje. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rairo. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rarembanje. Vanogara mudiriwo. Vakomana vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rarembanje. Vanogara mudiriwo. Usatambe navo. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rarembanje. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo ravakomana. Diriwo rarembanje. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rairo. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rarembanje. Vanogara mudiriwo. Vakomana vanogara mudiriwo ram. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo ravakomana. Kona diriwo rarembanje. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rairo. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rarembanje. Vanogara mudiriwo. Vakomana vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rarembanje. Vanogara mudiriwo. Usatambe navo. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo rarembanje. Vanogara mudiriwo. Diriwo ravakomana. Vakomana. Ndobva ndazonzwa kutapirirwa ona. Nyika ndeyedu iyo vakomana. Nyika ingainake iyi. Anditi manzwa. Nyaya iri panapa ndazotagwa nemwe munhu. Zvikanzi pana former ZBC journalist ari kutaura kuti hanzi Shepherd Yuda haasi musoja. Andatapirirwa. Ndikati icho ndo chokwadi. Dzakangoita presentation ye9 minutes. Amendo dzakaregerere kuenda mberi dzichidzidzisa maZimbabweans. Andina musi one wandakamboya panapa ndikati ndiri musoja ini. Kana one day randakaclaima to be a soldier. Not even a day one. Anditi maona. Ameno vanodziziva. Inini vanhu vekuzBC kataiti macelebrities tisikazoti basa. Idzi dzinonzani dzinonzi ndaukangana usaradzo manje. Tererai zvadziri kutaura munzwa.
Notifiera vedwei. Andrew, can you please tell Shepherd Yuda kuti haasi musoja? Drumas, inotifiera vedwei. Andrew, can you please tell Shepherd Yuda kuti haasi musoja?
Hati tarasha piro uda usigandanga usimsoja yo. Andisi msoja. I've never joined the ZNA, never in a day. Although I ndoda kuti chigwe. Andinabva ndamboita shungu dzekujoina chisoja. Army unoenda ne grade 7 you can join army. Unoenda une O level you can join army. Unoenda usina chikoro army you can join army. Kuenda kuhondo akudi kuenda kuchikoro akudi chikoro. Anonzi Andrew neshamba. Aya dzataura chokwadi. Andisi musoja. Andina pandakamboya panapa ndichitaura kuti ndiri musoja. Andina pandakamboya pano chitaura ndakambopinda chisoja. I am not a soldier. I've never been a soldier. Ndatimbatisise ipapo. I am not a soldier. I've never been a soldier. Ini ndandiri mambo. Ukaenda pa Jerry panonzi mambo. Pajeri vanoti mambo. Saka regai ndidzoke nditaure nyaya yamambo. Nombo cut up this presentation. Toita 30 minutes taura nyaya yamambo yeku prison. Munyatsonzwisisa, so don't go away. I'm going to relaunch this hanzi mukoma Andrew Neshamba. He is my brother. Media munhu mukuru paculture. Dzorasika. Abara dzirasika dzutaura chokwadi. Saka Eustace vanhu vari panapa mese ndakukata this presentation. Atisida kuikanganisa, toda kuzodzoka. Ani ndewe Drew Mass Media uyo Andrew Neshamba. I'm coming back. Anzi uyo murume anoita kunge mukadzi. Zvima programs zvake ndezvekuti ku YouTube. Amen. Saka I'm cutting this. I don't want to spoil this presentation. We want to upload it on YouTube. And then I'm coming back. We talk about mambo. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. Don't go away.